Authority. In ISERD, we help Israeli entities access the European Framework Program Horizon 2020. My colleagues Lee, Nirit, and myself, we will be here. We are helping especially Israeli companies access the EIC Accelerator, which is one of the EIC programs that will be discussed today. So if there are questions before, during, after, we will be here to answer. So for opening words, I would like to invite, please, Ms. Nili Shalev, the Managing Director of ISERD.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ruti, and thank you for my team and Ruti and the rest of the team here, Lee, Nirit, Talia, Nir, for the incredible job that you're doing, especially in the topic of the conference today, which is the SME instrument, the EIC, and the next phases of the EIC. So welcome, everybody. Just, I saw in the audience people from industry, from academia, consultants, government companies, infrastructure companies, and others. I want to share with you a little bit of about Israel's participation in the European framework programs. Israel, and I don't know, as you probably are aware, has been active in the European framework program as an associated country for over 23 years now, and we are now participating in the 8th European framework program, which is called, of course, Horizon 2020, which will be active until the end of 2020. We, as an associated country, are a very active participant, and basically the program in large is open to Israeli activity. So just to give you a little bit of numbers, till now, about 10,000 submissions from Israel. Out of them, 1,145 projects were financed. Projects can be a mono-beneficiary, so either industry or academia as a sole participant, or can be a collaborative program of industry, academia, and other partners in the project. 630 participants from the industry, 687 participants from academia, and 111 other participants like museum, research institutes, and other entities. And in total, Israel has received till now from the participation financial contribution of about 850 million euros from 2014 till today. But beyond the money itself, a report that we've done has shown that the contribution is much beyond the grant itself. It opens collaboration, it opens markets to companies, it allows universities to perform long-term cutting-edge research, very lucrative grants. So there is a lot of value that comes from this participation beyond the financial value itself. In the programs that are related to SME or participation, ISERD has done a tremendous job in the last few years, and we've seen growing participation of Israeli SMEs in the program. Just to give you a little bit of numbers on Israeli participation in the program, which until now was called the SME instrument, now changing to EIC. In phase 1, which is the initial grant just to have market validation, business plan, etc., there are 207 Israeli companies that participated in the program. And in phase 2, which are the substantial grants, up to 2.5 million euros per company, 59 companies received till now grants. Out of them in 2018, so from the 207 for phase 1, 75 were from 2018 and 17 for phase 2. So we see an increasing interest in the program, and because of this, we are happy to host today the EIC roadshow to give you a deeper insight into the program, the changes in the program for the upcoming year and a half, and looking towards the next program, assuming Israel will participate as an associated country. So welcome, everybody. I would like to welcome my friend and my colleague, the ambassador of the EU delegation to Israel, Ambassador Emmanuel Geoffrey, to say a few words. Welcome, Emmanuel.
Dear Nili Shalev, thank you very much for your introduction. I'd like also to welcome with us the director of DG RTD, Jean-David Malo. Bienvenue. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's on this event on innovation. I think this event, this roadshow on the European Innovation Council underline the very special part that innovation plays in the EU-Israeli connection. It is a success story. Certainly, 20 years of success story based on scientific excellence and added value, both for the EU and Israel. Only last month, I participated in this very building to the annual conference Startup Europe Comes to Israel, funded by the European Union. I've also hosted an awareness-raising event on the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, which is an agency of the European Union which will soon open an office officially in Tel Aviv, although they are already active. And we celebrated together with ISERD and the Israeli Innovation Authority our annual AMSA event for the excellent participation of Israeli company and higher education institutions in the Horizon 2020 programs. So all these are clear indications of how innovation and research and innovation are part and parcel of our relationship. It's a unique type of cooperation at the EU level that builds upon the cooperation that Israel has with member states bilaterally, but also give impetus to this bilateral cooperation as well. It's a system that we need to look as a whole. And it also complements the excellent relationship that Israel and the European Union have established in trade. The European Union remains the first trading partners of Israel, the excellent relationship we have in transportation with the Open Sky Agreement that has been a revolution in the way we move between Europe and Israel, and also the way tourism moves between Europe and Israel. And also many other projects in the higher education sectors and with Israeli public administration. So today we have this roadshow on the European Innovation Council Accelerator Pilot, what used to be called the SME Instrument, which is dedicated to companies and startups with high potential, high risk innovation ideas. High risk and cutting edge research is vital to move innovation forward. The IEC, the European Innovation Council, provides direct funding to innovators through European-wide open competition with a focus on all areas of disruptive and breakthrough market-creating innovation. We couldn't find a better partner than Israel for this. A country with big dreams, and we know that a country with less than 9 million people was a few meters away, a few minutes away to be the fourth country landing a spaceship on the moon just a few weeks ago. And this spirit of innovation, this daring spirit that in Israel is called the chutzpah, a country that contributed to a lot of great innovation in the past. We know that new technology originated here, many new technology, Waze, Mobileye for autonomous car, the dripping irrigation, the USB flash drive, the Intel first PC processor, are all those among the innovations of the past, but there are many others that are actually bubbling under the surface and ready to become marketable. So it's certainly a partner that is important for us, and as Nili was saying already, under the SME instrument, there's been a tremendous interest and success rate by SMEs in Israel. In fact, I'm told that since the beginning of this pilot in 2017, Israel ranks number 6 among beneficiaries after 5 EU member states, Spain, Germany, France, Italy, and the Netherlands. So I think this is an indication of the interests and of the success that Israeli SMEs had in this, under this specific branch of Horizon 2020. So a huge potential to do more. The sky is the limit, as we used to say, but perhaps we have to go beyond the sky, because I think that the innovations take us even further than that. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to hear from the colleagues from the European Commission and from the SMEs that already experienced this type of cooperation. Thank you again. Toda rabba.
So it gives us great pleasure to have here really senior and the most knowledgeable team from DG RTD doing the roadshow and coming to Israel. And so we highly appreciate and respect. And we have here 4 representatives coming, all of them heavily involved in the program, and so Jean-David Malo, the Deputy Director of DG RTD, heading this activity, and I think I can say also in the initiating minds behind this activity, Mr. Cornelius Schmaltz from ASME, the head of unit of the SME, Bartvar Kenningham from RIA, dealing with the Pathfinder, and Luis, our colleague, working very closely with Ruti and the team on all the practicalities, and the policy officer. So we are, I thought I moved something here. So we are going to start the day, and I would like to invite Jean-David Malo on stage to introduce the changes and the concept. So thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Ambassador, dear Emmanuel, dear Managing Director, my dear friend Nili, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here today. Not the first time for me in Israel, apparently the 11th time in 20 years. But I remember that one of the last time I came here, I was accompanying our former Director General, Robert Jan Smits, and it was at the moment of the launch of the current framework program, where we organized together with ISERD again an event, a whole-day event presenting what would be the Horizon 2020 program. And our former Director General started his speech by saying that he could not imagine a framework program without Israel. Why? Especially because Israel is a key actor regarding research and innovation and a strong partner of the European Union in this area. And this has been demonstrated again in the first 5 years of implementation of Horizon 2020, and it was recalled in their introductory speech by both Nili and Emmanuel. The European Innovation Council is typically an area where obviously Israeli innovators are already, to a certain extent, involved and could find additional opportunities in the new pilots that we have just launched. And this is the reason why, in the context of the roadshow that we are organizing at the occasion of the launch of this enhanced EIC pilot, it was for us absolutely necessary to have one of the events here in Tel Aviv in order to have the possibility to explain to you what is new, what are the new opportunities, and to have an exchange with you. So, as Nili said, we came with really skilled people in my team that will be here a bit later today to explain to you in very, very nitty-gritty details how the new schemes that we are just launching will work. And please do not hesitate to ask any question. This is really the purpose of this event. Let me start by giving you a global overview and the rationale behind the idea of the European Innovation Council. It's an idea, in fact, that has emerged in one of the first speeches of our current Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation, Carlos Moedas, in the first year of his appointment, and where he had the intuition, the vision that it would be possible for Europe to do in the innovation area what Europe has been able to do in the research area with the European Research Council. There is no reason why European, with this high-level universities, with the very skilled people that we have, there is no reason why we should not build something that make a change also in the area of innovation. Despite the fact that if you look at what happened in the last 20 years, Europe remains with a number of weaknesses. It's true that we are very strong in our capacity to generate knowledge. Look at the number of Nobel Prizes that are coming from Europe. Look at the number of publications that we have in top journals. Look also at the quality of some of our biggest universities or research organizations that are recognized worldwide and that are able to attract also great researchers from abroad. But one thing for sure, we are not yet as efficient in our capacity to turn this knowledge into innovation processes, new product, and therefore new jobs and growth. And the typical example for this is, for example, is just our capacity on one hand to generate deep tech startups. This we know how to do. I mean, we were able, for example, in 2017 to generate in Europe, in the EU 28, more startups than in the US. But when you look at the ultimate opposite of the journey of the growth of these startups, the number of unicorns that you have in the world, there the situation is really different. And I will show you in a minute a very speaking by itself slide showing that we have just in Europe 8% of the unicorns today. And by the way, half of them are in UK. So the situation is as such. And we are facing, in fact, three main types of weaknesses that could be regrouped, in fact, in this first slide. Our first main difficulty is indeed the fact that we, in addition to our incapacity to transform knowledge into innovation, we lack breakthrough and disruptive innovation that create new markets. By opposition to a country like yours, it was recalled by Emmanuel in its speech, you have been able in your country, despite the fact that you have a small market and that you are obliged, in fact, to find customers outside your borders, you have been able to create the capacity and the condition to launch new radical technologies that turned ultimately to radical innovation that were able to create new markets. It's not really the case in Europe. We have another key issue, which is our difficulty to accompany, in fact, the growth of these new ideas that are emerging and that are suddenly turned into a new business in the form of a startup or in the form of an SME hosting this disruptive innovation. And there is a rationale for this behind. I mean, there is a reason. First of all, we have not yet, despite a number of improvements over the last decade, we have not yet a single market in Europe. We have a single market. You have a single market in the US. You have not a single market in Europe. You remain with a number of different rules in different countries that are hampering, in fact, some expansion of activities for a number of companies. But in addition to this, we have still reluctant behaviors in terms of risk-taking for investors. Not because they are more idiots than their partners in the rest of the world, not because they are less knowledgeable, but because of some systemic reason. One of them being that, for example, the size of the VC funds in Europe are very small in comparison to what you can find in the US. And therefore, the type of risks that they could take, especially in very risky segment, which is in the very early stage, especially for deep tech company, I mean, is an area where for a fund, I mean, it could represent a too high level risk in terms of diversification of their portfolio of investments. So if you combine all of this, it explains also the number of reasons why we have those difficulties to accompany the growth of our young and innovative companies. And in addition of this, we remain with a fragmented innovation ecosystem. The fact that the VC market in Europe is fragmented per se is not an issue. I mean, the real issue is the size, because the VC market in the US is also fragmented. I mean, you will find VCs in hubs, but certainly not in the center in the US. But the problem here is that we have, in addition to this, not necessarily the interconnection that you absolutely need with the environment. And if money is important for the growth of companies, anything which is around money, like accompanying measures regarding mentoring, coaching, access to first buyers, public procurement initiative, and all of this is not enough structured and implemented in a systematic way in Europe. So here are the main weaknesses, if I can sum up. You can go more in details and find additional ones, but here are the main difficulties we are facing today, and here was in fact the rationale of the idea of our commissioner when he launched this idea of setting up a European Innovation Council to tackle those difficulties. Now, the reason why he launched also this initiative was that it's obvious that we are today at a moment where especially technology, but also evolution of business processes and business innovation will very likely dramatically change the way we live. So it will be a new moment of disruption that will be led also by disruptive technologies. The main difficulty with the disruptive technology is that you can only say that it was a disruptive technology and it took place. So to guess in advance what will be a disruptive technology is by definition a guess. But nevertheless, you have to take actions if you want to be within the front runners, or if you want to be even more within the leaders. And what we know is that if you look at the past, it's because you take some risk at a certain moment, it's because you have invested at a certain moment, maybe in certain technology, maybe in certain way of doing things, that indeed we succeeded. In the very old past, let's say at the beginning of the previous century, nobody knew that the car industry will be a disruptive sector. But it totally changed, in fact, the way we lived. The same for electricity, the same for telecommunication. And more recently, the revolution in the ICT sector has also totally changed the way we work and the way we live. I mean, when I was a child, I mean, for me, a mobile phone meant nothing. Today, my son cannot live without his mobile phone. It's directly the prolongation of his hand. But I suppose it's the same for you and your children. And it's changed the way we live. And we feel today that other technologies that are emerging, like artificial intelligence, like quantum technology, will have an impact in the way we live. We also feel that automotive cars are coming. We don't know yet how exactly, but we feel it. Who will lead this revolution? It's obvious that the previous one has been led by the US. Thanks also to some of your innovation, by the way. But it's clear when you look at the leaders in a number of sectors that the United States led this revolution. But who will lead the next revolution? We have in Europe and in with our associated country like Israel, the capacity to be part of the leaders if we take appropriate actions for this. I will not insist on this slide because I already told you about those two other reasons of the weaknesses that we are facing today, our incapacity to have a real powerful VC market and the remaining fragmented innovation ecosystem in Europe. But as I promised to you, just to show you the situation of unicorns in the world. Of course, unicorns are only a small part of the picture, but it speaks by itself. This representation of the world, because it's a representation of the world based on the number of unicorns and their size and their market, dating from the end of 2017, speaks by itself. And it's another example demonstrating that if we are very strong on the upstream dimension of the support to innovate, to radical innovation in the world, we are not very strong in the downstream dimension. Now, when we developed the idea, we of course worked with a number of professionals. You could imagine that it is certainly not within a dark office of a dark administration like the European Commission that you can be directly hands-on with the reality. We need for this to discuss with people that are directly involved on the ground. And when we thought about what should be done in order to tackle the main obstacles that I addressed to you in my introduction, we created this group at the request of our commissioner, which was composed, as you can see, of venture capitalists like Hermann Hauser, who was the chair of this group, which is the co-founder of Amadeus Capital in London, with successful start-upper like Tavet Inricus from Estonia, or with very successful also corporate leaders like Jim Snaber Hagemann, which is currently the CEO of Siemens and now also the CEO of Maersk. And with some new and young start-uppers like Marjolaine that you can see here, or key actors of the innovation ecosystem, such as Constantijn van Oranje, which is the Dutch SME envoy. And we try to see how to come with concrete solution. They came with a report that was published in the early 2018, a report that have been shared with European leaders. You can see here Commissioner Moedas sharing it with the French president, but with not only the French president, all the EU leaders within the European Council. And this led, in fact, to a conclusion of the European Council in June last year, which was, at a certain extent, historic. Because keep in mind something, in June 2018, in the very beginning of the month, the Commission made its proposal for the future framework program, Horizon Europe. And within the proposal, of course, we have incorporated the idea to launch the European Innovation Council starting in 2021 for the new framework program, based on the recommendation of the group of people that I just introduced you. 3 weeks later, the European Council met, as they are regularly meeting, And in their conclusions, they say two things. First, that there will be a European Innovation Council in the next framework program, something extremely powerful because the negotiation with the European Parliament had not started. So the Council has decided at this moment that in any case there will be, and that it was a red line for them, there will be a European Innovation Council. And second of all, even more important, and this is the reason why we are here today, they have requested the European Commission to start immediately with the pilot and not to wait for 2021 because time is running and it's urgent to act. And this, of course, was key. And it explains the reason why we have tabled a proposal, of course, in the context of Horizon Europe, which, by the way, has been agreed after very constructive but very intense discussion between the Parliament and the Council. But we have tabled also a pilot, and this is what I will introduce you today. So in a nutshell, the European Innovation Council will be a one-stop shop for any innovator. And I insist, any innovator. An innovator can be found, as everybody knows, somewhere in the back of a garage, but it can also be found in a lab of a university, it can be found in a company, it can be found everywhere. It can be a researcher, it can be an entrepreneur. This is the first thing. And what we will do with the European Innovation Council is to ensure that there will be a one entry point, a single entry point. In other words, the upstream dimension of the generation of an idea that could lead to a radical innovation, but also the support to the scaling up of a deep tech startup, all of this is regrouped under the single umbrella of the European Innovation Council. And if you want to talk about technology readiness level, it means that the European Innovation Council is covering from TRL 1 up to TRL 9. Of course, with different schemes, but we will enter into the details of this in a second. The second main characteristic is that indeed there will be two main instruments. One that will focus on the stimulation and the support for the generation of new ideas, new radical technologies that could be a game changer in the industrial sector later on. This program, which is called the Pathfinder, the EIC Pathfinder, is of course a program that is building on some success that we already had, and which is mainly based on the Future Emerging Technology program in both its bottom-up and top-down dimension, so FET open and FET proactive. But the main change that we are introducing is that we were not giving all the necessary means for the promoter of a FET program to try to use the knowledge they were able to generate during the FET projects that they were developing. And while we will keep the DNA, the raison d'être of the FET project within the new Pathfinder program, we will add another dimension, which is the possibility to have support for transition activities in order to use the knowledge and to prepare the ground for the next step towards innovation and use of the knowledge. The second leg, if I could present it this way, of the European Innovation Council will be therefore on the downstream dimension. While the Pathfinder is focusing on an area where we are already strong, but where we need to continue to invest to remain leaders, the accelerator, which is the downstream dimension of the EIC, has the purpose to tackle one of our main weaknesses, which is this incapacity to provide the means for notably deep tech startup and SMEs which have the potential for scale-up. And there, you will see in a minute that we are introducing a lot of changes. Of course, we will build on the success of the SME instrument, in particular of the SME instrument phase 2, and I know that in the room today you have some lucky winner of competitions under the SME instrument phase 2. But we will turn into reality what was initially thought, which was the idea to have after the phase 2, the phase 3. The phase 3 had the purpose to provide the means for the scale-up, but not with a support coming from the framework program. And regarding scale-up of a company, you have not a lot of possibilities. Either they are able to create commercial business, this is one way to grow up, and usually is the best way possible, or you are giving them the possibility to attract investment, in particular equity investment. And what we will do in this context is that for the first time, not only we will offer the possibility to provide grant to startup and SMEs, but also a combination of grant and equity support, what we are calling blended finance. And regarding the blended finance, in the equity part, in addition to the usual 2.5 million euro maximum that you can receive in the context of the SM instrument, we'll offer the possibility of an additional up to 15 million euro of equity investments. You will tell me, does it mean that it is the European Commission who will invest in companies? Yes, I know it's very surprising, but the answer is yes. But not necessarily each time alone. The purpose of our intervention is to tackle a market failure where obviously for this very particular target group that are startups that are not able to generate revenues before a long period of time because they have not yet finalized their R&D. They have some long maturity in order to make the technology valid. They will maybe have also to pass through a number of state validation, for example, in the health sector or whatever. Those kind of companies which need sometimes very huge investment have a number of difficulties to find private investors to continue, in fact, the journey of their development. And despite the fact that we have tried together with the private sector to tackle the issue by providing either some guarantees or to providing additional funding in the constitution of VC funds with private sector in the past, in the last decade, and the European Investment Fund, for example, was very instrumental in this context. The reality and the facts are there. The situation has not really evolved along the last decades. So we are turning the proposal in a different way. If the private sector is not ready to go together with us, we will be ready to go together with the private sector. I mean, at the end, it could be the same. And very likely, it will not dramatically and badly change the way it works. The only thing is that the signal to the market will be of a different nature, because therefore we will appear as a long-term investor, an anchor investor of this kind of company who could give some additional reassurance to other investors, in particular private investor. But my colleagues will come more in details on this in this afternoon, and I will also be there to tell you how we intend to do it. We had the opportunity of a very, I think, fruitful and interesting exchange yesterday with some representative of the VC capital, the venture capital market in Israel. And of course, our objective is not to stay in the capital of the company, but to opt out as soon as possible if the private sector is coming. But if there is a need to stay for a certain period in order to accompany the growth of the company, we will do it. So this possibility is now not only a dream, not only an objective, it's a reality. It's a call that we have launched and where my colleagues will come back this afternoon with concrete dates. The first date for proposal submission will be on the 9th of October. The idea, and I insist, is not to crowding out the private investment. On the contrary, our objective will be as far as possible and as quickly as possible to do exactly the opposite, to ensure crowding in of private investment, and possibly also at the very beginning, at the moment of the proposal. But if for any reason there is no private investor which is ready to invest in a company which is considered by a panel of experts as a very good quality and that deserve this equity support, we will be ready as the first step to go alone. As I told you, the EIC cannot be only a funding mechanism. I mean, you know better certainly than a number of other key actors here in Israel, in comparison to European countries, that it's absolutely vital to have a number of accompanying measures in addition to the funding mechanism. It's absolutely vital to create the condition for the new startups to have a connection with value chain key actors in order to create the possibility of business. It's absolutely vital to provide them with the necessary means in order to build the best team possible, because at the end of the day, behind a good innovation, you have people. And it's vital to provide them also with the necessary skills. So we will continue to provide those additional accompanying measures in the context of the EIC, and we will expand them, not only in the context of the new EIC accelerator, which is succeeding to the SM Instrument Phase 2, but also in the context of the Pathfinder for not only the SMEs, but for any legal entity which has the intention to create a business, to create a spin-off or a startup and so on. Because it starts there, not only when they became an SME, maybe it's already too late. It's also require a new way of working on the side of the Commission. You can be sure of the total commitment of the newly established European Innovation Council task force within the Commission, and in particular of my 3 colleagues that are here today. But as I told you, and it's true also for myself, we are not people which are directly connected with the reality of the state of the art, for example, of the development of a particular technology. We are not, maybe some of them were in the past, but we are not anymore entrepreneurs. We are not anymore investors, or we were never investors. We need people within the Commission which could accompany the projects that we will support and which could be trusted by the beneficiary of our project in order to help them to go towards their objective, to have the possibility of connections with potential partners or clients, or to help them to identify how the market could evolve. And this is a role of new people that we will hire for a temporary basis in order to ensure that they are not disconnected from the reality. New people that we will hire within the Commission that will be program managers. Program managers' idea is not coming out of the blue. It's an idea that, of course, is already used, for example, in some American agencies. Everybody has in mind the DARPA. But, I mean, I like DARPA. It's not that I don't like DARPA, but DARPA is a very particular case because with DARPA, you have already a first buyer behind, which is the army in reality, a potential first buyer. It's not the case with the EIC. I mean, we have not the means to be the first buyer. But if you look at another American agency like ARPA-E, which is the one on energy, there you have something which is more in the same spirit. And this is this kind of profile of people that you can find in ARPA-E, but also in DARPA, that we will hire and for which we have just launched a few days ago a call for expression of interest in order to select by the end of the year the first 5 program managers of the European Innovation Council. So if some of you believe that you have the profile, or if you know people who have the profile, please have a look at this call, and we will have a look on the candidature by the end of this month. The deadline is by the 31st of July. One thing, you must be a national of the European Union. But I know also in Israel, where I have a lot of friends, that you have a number of you that sometimes have 2 nationality or reason to, so just for you to have a look. So the pilot has been launched. It's an important pilot, 2.2 billion euros that are broken down this way. Of course, it's not coming from nowhere. It was recalled by Emmanuel a few minutes ago. We started the first evolution of the pilot, as you know, at the end of 2017, especially with an important change in the context of the SM instrument, with the introduction of the jury in the selection of the proposal. In other words, not only an evaluation on paper, but also an interview, a face-to-face interview between the submissionaire and jury composed mainly of investors. And you have here on the slide the main results that we had with the first phase. Now we are starting with the real EIC pilot on the basis of the characteristic of the future EIC that will be proposed to start, as you know, on the beginning of 2021. So during the period 2019-2020, we will test the main characteristic of the new EIC. The first one is the introduction of the Pathfinder, as I told you, but with one of the main characteristics that will be that within FET Proactive, we have identified 6 topics in which we believe that very likely some disruptive technology may emerge. Again, my colleague will come back to this later this afternoon. The second is the introduction of the EIC accelerator, so the possibility for a startup and an SME not only to ask for grant support, but for blended finance support. And this is live now from the beginning of June and with the first deadline in October this year. The third one is the recruitment of the first 5 EIC program managers, I told you a few minutes ago. And the last novelty that we would like to test is the new way we will govern, in fact, this new structure, and where we would like to have an EIC advisory board. We launch a call for expression of interest for this in the 18th of March, with the deadlines on the 10th of May. We have received something like almost 600 candidatures from all over the world. Very high-level people, I can tell you. We were very happy and impressed by the quality of people who have submitted their proposal. So it was rather difficult to make some choices, reason why we have a very important reserve list, and we will, of course, use the reserve list for other purpose, including if one of the members, for any reason, decide to withdraw or because of another appointment. But here are the 22 members that have been appointed by our Director General, Jean-Éric Paquet, with the agreement of our Commissioner Carlos Moedas, on the 27th of June, so it's very recent. The chair will be Mark Ferguson. which is the boss of Science Foundation Ireland, but which is also an entrepreneur. And the vice chair will be Hermann Hauser, who was the former chair of the EIC high-level group of innovators I mentioned a few minutes ago. So have a look. You have a relatively good gender balance, 40% women, not enough, but already 40% women, and a relatively good geographical balance as well as sectors that are represented. Now, in conclusion, of course, this pilot has the purpose to pave the ground to the future. The future is Horizon Europe. In Horizon Europe, the proposal of the Commission is to dedicate 10 billion to the EIC. So something like 11, a bit more than 11% of the whole budget of Horizon Europe. Of course, nobody knows what will be the budget for the time being, despite the fact that we had an agreement on the content of Horizon Europe between the Parliament and the Council in last March, April. There is, as you know, not yet a final agreement and even a final discussion on the proposal of the whole budget for the future multi-financial framework of the Union, and in particular, therefore, on the EIC. We will maintain the main characteristic, but we will have additional possibilities in the future. It will be even more easy to stop or reorient projects. We will have additional link, especially during the growth of the companies, for access to additional finance, and this is why we will create bridges with a new program which is called InvestEU in the Future Framework Program, which is in fact the successor of the Juncker Plan, the successor of all the financial instruments that maybe you know today under Horizon 2020, like Innofin. Innofin will not be anymore within the framework program for research and innovation, but within a specific dedicated windows for research and innovation, and another one for SMEs, in particular innovative SMEs, within InvestEU. We will have the bulk of the budget in the future that will go to the accelerator, and within the accelerator, the bulk of the budget will go to blended finance, and not to grant only. This is a result of the agreement between the member states. And we will have in the future, this has already been agreed, possibility of fast-track access from national programs, private or public, to the accelerator, to source, in fact, a very promising project to go quicker for the scale-up phase. So, EIC 4 years ago was a dream. In June, in 2018, was an objective of the Commission in order to convince Council and Parliament. And since last summer, and thanks to our leaders, is now in 2019 a concrete reality. It demonstrates when you have strong argument that political leaders can take quick decision, and that the European Commission can also act quickly. Now it's here, but at the end of the day, it's not for us. At the end of the day, it's for you. It's for the innovators, it's for the entrepreneur. So now, up to you. We are just here to help you to turn your dream into reality for the benefit of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jean-David Malo, for this interesting presentation. I'm sure there are many questions which we'll be able to address later in the Q&A. Now I'm very happy to invite Mr. Ziv Perelman, VP Medical Solutions at Elminda. Elminda is a company that has recently won the Phase 2 SME instrument, or its new name, the EIC Accelerator Grant. and he will share with us his experience and journey till winning the grant. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here. And a special thank for ISERD and especially Nili and Ruth for assistance, support, and guidance with all the process, this long process of the SME. So today I will talk about personalized data-driven brain health. Here you can see an animation of the brain. I show it not only to show a cool animation, but to demonstrate the fact that in order to understand the brain, it's a hard task because the brain is complex. And we've tried to do it over the last 13 years. Elminda was established in 2006. We are pioneered in the field of AI and big data in the field of clinical neurophysiology. We were mainly focused in the US market and China, and only lately, as part of the activities that we have with the SME, we shift our attention to Europe as well. We have several strategic partnerships, many patents, and regulation approval both in the US and Europe. So to give you a sense what is the product we are talking about, we call it BNA, Brain Network Analytics, and we basically a software that we measure the brain using EEG device to measure the electrical field of the brain. We do it under cognitive task in order to challenge the brain. We upload everything to the cloud and compare it to our database. We have a large database of brain measure, more than 470,000 data set in our database. And we provide the physician with actionable report, what he can do with it as part of the treatment. So our vision is a world where brain health is data-driven, objective, and personalized. And the mission is to transform clinical practice for brain disorder with certainty, to increase efficacy, lower cost, and improve quality of life. We started with collected data. As I mentioned, we have a large database, and this is one of the assets of the company. Lately, let's say 3 years ago, we were able to connect this database with clinical information and called it a data with context. And this is our current product. And what we are planning to do, and this is part of the EU project, is to develop a predictive analytic, an actionable neuromarker that assists the physician. So this technology is a platform. We can use it in many different uses. We start with a brain checkup. We do it with healthy in order to see whether they have some kind of decline in the brain. We use it as a biomarker, early biomarker, mainly for dementia, Parkinson, and depression. The third use is for prediction, in order to find the optimal treatment for a patient. This is the focus of the SME project, and I'll elaborate in a second about this part. And we mainly use it as a treatment analytics to give the physician additional layer of information during the treatment process. The prediction project, we call it PREDICT. It's a precision medicine in the treatment for depression. This project actually started 6 years ago as part of the BSMT, Brain Stimulation and Monitoring Toolbox Consortium. It's the Israeli Brain Consortium that was funded by the IAA. And we finished this consortium and submitted an SME. Depression is a huge disorder. You can see the numbers. It's the #1 leading cause of disability and the most costly brain disorder in Europe. The current process, when patients come to a physician, the physician gives him a random choice, random treatment. He tells him, come back in several weeks. He comes, he changes, and again, and again, and again. The current process based on trial and error with high mortality and really high cost. What we offer is to add a neuromarker before you start the first treatment that will direct your treatment and increase efficacy dramatically. So we will be able to have improved outcome, reduce mortality, and reduce cost. So just to give you the context and the notion, 2 patients arrive to the clinic. One, we measure the brain, and based on the brain test, we can tell them which one of the 3 potential treatment will be the most efficient for them. We can also give them information about how long it would take until they will respond, and give them some sense of which adverse events, what's the likelihood to develop adverse events with a specific treatment. We started this program with 4 sites in Europe, in Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and Israel. I can tell you that after the grant already approved, there are other companies that asked to join, and there are allocated funds in order to join, countries like Sweden and UK. So the basic idea behind this project is that we start with clinical validation in order to show calibration and show the value in Europe. We then will show adoption of this technology with the centers that I mentioned, and then we'll expand it with distributor partners, and we will also we are working with the insurance company in order to find a health system that will support this activity. And now I will give you 2 slides about our experience with the SME project and the process. So it was a long process. It took us several years to get this grant. We had 2 submissions with a different indication. We start with MTBI concussion. We actually got a seal of excellence, but not grant. We're happy with the seal of excellence, but we understood that we are limited because of the impact on the EU market. So then we took 1 step back. We submitted a phase 1 for depression. We better learned the market, and based on this understanding, we submitted the current project for depression, and this is a project that actually won and got the funding. Why SME? So the first answer is the money, of course. Every startup company needs the money, but I think there are other reasons. It's smart money. I can tell you that during the process of the submission and resubmission, we learn a lot, and it's actually improve our understanding the market, the product, and where to focus. So although it was annoying to have another submission, but it assists us to improve our product. I can also say that this grant is very appealing for other investors. I can tell you we are now closing round D, and one major a major part of the presentation that we show for the investor is this grant, and I can tell you it's create an impact. The investor really appreciates the fact that it was selected by the EU. It's also a good, it provides us an option to develop a new relationship with and collaboration. So other large company engage with us and collaborate with us in order to be part of this project, and it provides us with both commercial collaboration and collaboration for research, and also it opens us doors for the leading institute all over Europe. I mentioned 2 of them in Sweden, Karolinska Institute, and Oxford from the UK. And it seems that many stakeholders in Europe would like to take part in this project. So just to conclude, we were focused in the US and in China. And because of this project, we decided to shift our attention and to start this activity in Europe. So we initiate activity, both the project, the SME project, and other commercial activity in Europe. And now, after this project started, we got all kind of requests, both from the US and China, to start and duplicate or replicate it in other countries. So thank you again for the representative of the EU, and thank you all. Good luck.
Ziv, you can stay on stage. Jean-David, please join us. Yair. So please join us. We're going to have a short discussion on the topic on the EIC and the pilot, and we're going to open a little bit to Q&As also. And after lunch, we're going to dive into the details of the due diligence submission and other again, thank you for joining. So you met Ziv, you met Jean David, Yair. Why don't you introduce yourself? You have a mic here.
My name is Yair Safrai. I'm a jury in Brussels in the program, so this is why I'm on this stage. But in addition, I was in the VC industry in Israel really since the beginning of the 90s, and in the last 10 years, roughly, I'm mainly working with companies as an active chairman and help the companies get to the market and be successful.
So Yair, keep the mic. So you are sitting in the jury, and so Jean David has a certain way of looking at the program and looking at which companies may be relevant to submit, but you sit on the jury board. So tell us a little bit of what type of companies do you see? Do you see companies that are seed stage? Do you see companies with VC backing like, and financial backing like Elminda? Tell us a little bit of what do you see in the panels?
I would say that the definition of high risk, high potential is the most important one. Unlike in the VC industry, the high risk really exists here, and companies are trying really to be part of. Just a second. We don't see a lot of companies with VC investors. This is something that we don't see, and this is again because of the high risk. And the EU is trying to really bridge the gap, as was said here, and take companies that cannot, in a way, raise money outside. And this is due, for example, for certain industries that are slower than what the VCs are looking for, like the clean tech industry, like industrial technologies, and so on. So we see, and medical also is an industry that in many cases is slow. So we see a lot of such companies with high risk. We also should remember that on the jury, although there are many investors, still the criteria is not IRR. Unlike the VC or the investor industry, this is not the main criteria. However, the criteria is high potential. And if you take all this, it is in a way like the incubator program in Israel. We see also companies in later stages. I don't remember many companies in a very early stage, in seed stage. Usually the program and the jury want to see some traction in the market. So in general, I would say certain industries in a bit of a later stage and that have hard time to raise money for different reasons. I mentioned few of them, but another one can be that in a certain country, you don't find really VCs. For example, if somebody is coming from Lithuania, they have very hard time to raise money in their own country, and in that case, the EU program is really a good fit.
So, Jean David, first of all, is this accurate? Does he, is Yair a good, someone? So I want your view and your take on that. What kind of companies are you looking at? And maybe take it, are you a high risk or high return type of investor? I think this was already answered, but just to hear it from you. And also take it also to what would you like to see come out of the pilot? What would be a good outcome of this pilot from your perspective?
First of all, everything what he has said is indeed totally accurate. No, and it's always very, very important to have a testimony from people that are experiencing it. So indeed, this is the way it works. And what is very important also in what he said is that you have a variety of companies that can benefit, in fact, from the so-called SM instrument today, EIC accelerator tomorrow. And the situation depends mainly of the sector in which they are involving, and mainly also to the stage of development of the technologies they are carrying out. So it's very various. What is key in this, and this is something I would like also to underline in what Yair said, it's the high impact, the high potential of the company, and it answers to your question. We will not, as an investor, because we are setting up an EIC fund for the equity dimension of the EIC accelerator, we will not be driven by financial return. It's not the purpose of our investment. The purpose of our investment is to have a high impact in the sector, a high impact in the development of a new technologies that can create new markets, and where hopefully the company will accompany, will play a key role. And this explains also the reason why some of the main characteristics of our investment will be that it will be a patient capital if it is needed during the implementation of the growth of the company. It will also have the characteristics that it will not dilute the ownership of the company. And I just would like here to take, of course, an extreme example. If you talk about a startup or a very young company that has just been created, which may be and very likely have no assets at all, certainly not financial assets. Maybe the need for this kind of company in terms of equity support could be estimated, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 million euro, of course, in several installments. Obviously, if we are the only investor, suddenly, if you look at the share of the capital, we may appear as the new owner of the company. It will never be the case because one thing that we have already announced is that in no way we will take more than 25% of the voting rights within the company, even if we represent the huge majority of the shares of the company. The purpose behind is very simple. The purpose of our support, again, is not to make a return. If we can make return, of course, we will be more than happy, because if we have a return, we will use it again in a kind of revolving fund to support additional companies. But it's not the main objective. And second, what is key for us is to be able to create the condition for the development of the company in order for the company to attract private investors. I mean, our raison d'être is certainly not to stay within the company. If there is a wish of the company that we stay, we will be ready to consider it. Doesn't say that we will do it each time, but to consider it. We will be also, we will have a particular look in also in certain sectors which could have an impact on the sovereignty and the security of the Union. You could imagine in cybersecurity, homeland security, if the company is so successful that it has a direct link with our homeland security, by definition, we will take care that the company suddenly is not anymore European or friend of Europe. So these kind of things, but the raison d'être by us normally is to leave at a certain moment and just to create the condition for other investors to join.
So in a year and a half of a pilot stage, what would be the best outcome for you? What would you like? So you already have it in the next framework program, but still, what would be the best outcome from your perspective?
I mean, to be very transparent and honest with you, a pilot of 1 year and a half, how could I say, you will not learn a lot. Huh? So to be pragmatic, the pilot is a kind of pre-launch of what we want to do later on. But nevertheless, we will learn something. We will learn, for example, if indeed we were able to attract the good target group. And there we will have the immediate answer. We will see what kind of proposal we will receive starting in October. If indeed we have created conditions that are attractive for companies to come and call for not only a grant but also an equity support. We will test if the way we will do the due diligence to get in the context of the EIC fund together, potentially with other investors, including private investors, is fitting for purpose. So we will test a number of things before the fully fledged EIC implementation 2021. Now, what would be, just going a step further behind your question, what would be a very interesting result of the implementation of all of this in the pilot and is indeed our capacity to help a number of companies to grow up. I mean, let's be very clear. One of the key performance indicators will be this one. I mean, how many startups, how many companies we have helped for a real scale up, and to see also which one were able to attract private investors as quickly as possible, taking into account their characteristic. I mean, it's very likely that the ones that will be disruptive in the ICT sector for app on mobile phone and so on, I mean, the results will be quick in the market. But the ones that are working in euro area or the ones that are working in the renewable energy or environment, by definition, the maturity is longer. So there, we will have to take into account also those parameters.
Ziv, Elminda is a deep tech company, have been around for a few years, raised substantial amounts of funding. Describe the various funding that you received and what's, from your perspective, if you can color money, what would be the different aim of that funding, and why have you been so persistent in getting the SME grant?
So Elminda raised so far 3 rounds. We closed round C 2 years ago. And most of the money, we don't have VCs in this round, mainly private investors and angels. We also got quite a lot of support from the IIA, either with the OCA's mechanism or the consortium. I think the money that we got from the IIA was mainly focused on really innovative technology. It was not for the main products that we bring to the market, but it was to like the next generation of technologies. Whereas the main investor focused on building the main product and for the activities for commercialization and regulation. The reason that we approached to the SME is because we have this project, the Predict project. It was one of the innovative project, and it wasn't part of the main roadmap that the investor gave us funds for. So by getting this grant, it allows us to focus in this new product and bring it to the market. I think without this grant, we wouldn't move to this direction. We wouldn't move forward with this new product until we will close round D. And I think it's help us to bring this technology, to move forward with the technology and also to move to the EU market.
So it's a good business decision also to have this shift?
We will know after we will start. We'll know in May 2021.
Okay. Yair, looking at the scheme of grant plus equity, from your perspective as also as an investor, what are the main advantages that you see in this scheme, and what things concern you or you see as challenges maybe?
Well, I look first of all from the company side and not from the investor side. From the company side, I think that this is the best alternative such a company will have. There are many companies in certain areas that, for different reasons, have hard time to raise money, and I mentioned them before. And I think that this is a very attractive mechanism to raise money and to help those companies raise money in on the outside world. It will help the companies to do that, and it will make them more attractive for investors. Therefore, I think that also investors would like it because part of it is non-dilutive capital, and part of it also extends the ability of the company to do more projects, as mentioned here. It also gives access to European markets, institutions, and so on. So in general, I see it as a very positive grant and scheme. And I believe that if the process and bureaucracy will know how to handle that, then better and better companies will approach. So I think that in a way it is very important for the European Council to try and make it as easy and good as possible, because otherwise it will become preventive for a startup that has to spend resources and time to go for such a program. If it will become cumbersome, then many companies that can raise money outside more easily will skip it. So I urge the agency really to work on the process more than anything else.
So Jean-David, can you describe a little bit the due diligence process in a high level for this panel? I think we'll dive into it maybe later in more detail.
Yes, you will have the opportunity of a more detailed presentation later after the lunch. But just in a nutshell, and for those who knows the SME instrument phase 2, it starts exactly the same way. So in fact, you submit a proposal, and it's one of our objectives of simplification to avoid difficulties and burden for the applicant. The applicant forms will be the same, the structure will be the same. Of course, the type of information and the justification will be of a different nature if you just call for grant or if you call for grant and equity. Evaluation is done as usual, first of all, by a group of evaluators coming from the technology side in a multidisciplinary way and taking into account the potential of the sector in terms of market. And then you have the jury interview with investors who will decide if you go or if you don't go for potential support. The only difference is that when you will call for debt and grant and equity support, after the go of the jury will not decide the amount of the equity. It will just say if it makes sense to have an equity investment or not. So there will be a decision in terms of equity investment, but not on the amount, on the conditions attached, on the other elements of the equity investment. This will be the result of a due diligence that will be carried out, in fact, by funds that we are setting up, and that will be composed of professionals of the venture capital areas and others. In this due diligence, in fact, the type of due diligence that any investor is doing will be carried out. but with, of course, some differences. I mean, the objective will not be a return on investment mainly, but to see what are the needs of the company. I just would like to say that as the IEA said, in the huge cases today, the submission here under the so-called now EIC accelerator, former SME instrument phase 2, they are coming alone. I mean, they are not coming with an investor, or they have not yet an investor in their capital. But some have. And of course, if the existing investor or a potential new investor is ready to accompany the company together with us, do not hesitate to mention it in your application. Because, of course, the EIC fund, when it will carry out the due diligence, the first thing that we will also do is to see if there is already an investor, because this will have an impact on the way the company will be evaluated and how the valuation will be done. But also it will maybe have a direct consequence on the capacity for us to realize co-investment for the company. And maybe we will not go alone. So keep this in mind. Another important thing in the same spirit is that when we will do the due diligence, we will also ask the applicant if he accepts or not that we offer the possibility of investment to other investors, not only to us. Other investors mean whom? Means first the network of investors with whom we are working today in the context of the cooperation that we have mainly with the European Investment Fund and the European Investment Bank. So something like 250 VC funds that exist in Europe, or business angels, family offices, and so on, that could be interested. Of course, you will have the right as an applicant to say no, because we will never force you. But you could also say yes, under the following condition, and therefore will offer to the other investors the possibility maybe to participate to the investment. And once all of this is done, of course, there will be an offer that will be made to the applicant in terms of investment, and there will be a usual negotiation with the applicants before an equity investment is signed. The equity investment will, by definition, take place after the grant agreement. But the grant agreement that, for example, a friend and colleague has obtained for Almeida will be provided with the same speed. I mean, we will not wait for the agreement on the equity investment to start already the support on the grant side. This will take the usual process flow, but the equity investment will come maybe a few months later, depending on the result of the evaluation.
And maybe say just what type of companies do you see asking for equity and grant component, and which ones would,
I mean,
from maybe a TRL perspective, or?
So in any case, we remain with the same magnitude in terms of TRL positioning as the one that we have under the SME instrument phase 2. So TRL 5, TRL 6 as a starting point. But one important thing is that, so you will know more, my colleagues will tell you more about this this afternoon, but one important thing is that for equity, you can use equity for anything. You can use equity for doing activities under TRL 6, 7, 8, and 9. While with the grant, you have not the right to use a grant for TRL 9 activities. I'm just telling you this because, of course, it's important when you are drafting your proposal. Of course, your proposal in one is one thing, the implementation is another thing. But keep this in mind. Regarding the profile of the company, I just would like to insist on something else. There is something that may appear as a small change, but which is nevertheless an important change in the way the calls are designed. you have the possibility indeed to continue to ask only for grant support. But you have to explain why. In other words, you have to explain why. Maybe it's premature for you to foresee scale-up, and therefore you still need to have some support in form of grants before going to the scale-up phase. It's one way. Or maybe because you have already secured the scale-up means, so therefore you do not need for a call for equity support. But this was not requested in the past. This will have to be demonstrated, justified, argumented in your proposal. Of course, if you are calling for blended finance, it's because you need means for scale-up. So there, it's obvious that you have to demonstrate it.
Ziv, first of all, is this new scheme relevant for Elminda? Do you see Elminda applying? But also, if you can give some recommendations to companies in the room, how to apply in a most successful way and what they should focus on in the application.
Okay, first of all, regarding this mechanism, it's a very appealing mechanism for a company. Of course, in the field of ours, that it's a long run, it's a marathon run to get to the market. My question is it also relevant for previous year winner? It's something that is, we are waiting to this answer. So it's very appealing opportunity. As I mentioned before, it's for us already the SME grant is a smart money, and we see a lot of additional values from these funds. So I believe that to have also the EU as investor, it could increase the values that we can get on top of this money. So it seems something very relevant and interesting. Regarding to your second question, I think from our experience, it was trial and error. To submit, to get the answer, to understand, to read, not to say, okay, they just give me a general feedback. Although it's a short feedback, to try to understand what is behind this feedback and to improve it. And it's something, the final submission should be really tight and up to the small details. So it's not like we are used to have here in other grant mechanism, that we have like in 80% should be ready and we can submit it. In the SME, we need to get until each one of the details and to make sure that everything is close before you submit it. So
that's an important tip for Israelis, yes. Right? Yeah. Okay, we want to open the floor to a little bit of Q&As. We have a mic that will go around, and Jean-David, would you like to answer Ziv's question?
Yes, and I promise I give you back the microphone in a second. No, because it's a usual question. Legally speaking, yes, you can submit a proposal even if you have already had one in the past, including if you have one running. Okay? You can. Now, of course, if you have one which is running, the difficulty is that you will have to demonstrate that by definition, if you go for grant only, for example, it's something totally different. My recommendation for grant only, don't do it. Even if legally you can, huh? But I mean, honestly, to demonstrate, especially when you are a small enterprise, that it will be something totally different than the grant that you have already now, it's very difficult. For blended finance, it's different, because for blended finance, you don't only tackle a particular project of development, you tackle the development of your company as a whole. So, of course, you will have to demonstrate that the grant part that you are requesting is not overlapping with the other one, but there you are not obliged to call for 2.5 million euro. You may call for just some additional activities that are not covered by the running grant, but you are mainly calling for the means for the development of your company in the equity part. And this is by definition something that was not foreseen in your initial running grant. So legally it's possible, technically it's possible, but if it's grant only, I don't recommend it because it will be very difficult to demonstrate. For blended finance, yes, it's easier to demonstrate, but keep in mind that you have to demonstrate that there will be no overlap. And to, okay, this is the...
Okay, we're going to open to questions. First hand there. Please keep it short. The questions, so...
This is a very technical one. If you're going to be... Hello? Okay. If you're going to get... if you're going to go to the mixed proposal, and you had a previous round of investment at a certain valuation with you know, some private investors in it, how does it affect or not that evaluation of the equity portion of your fund?
I got it. The reason why we will never publish a single methodology for valuation of company as far as the investment of the EU in the context of the EIC fund is concerned is precisely for this kind of reason. If we are the only investor, it's rather easy. I mean, we will base our evaluation on the methodologies that we will develop. But if we are co-investing with other investors, either new investors or existing investors, of course we will have to discuss with those one in order to agree on the way we will evaluate investment. So this will be taken into account. It does not mean that we will follow 100% the way it was done, but this will be taken into account in order to find a relevant agreement.
Yes, please. Nirit?
Hi. Don't you think it will be difficult for companies to submit to the EIC accelerator without knowing the conditions beforehand? And what happens if they are accepted for equity funding and after that there is no agreement between the company and the EIC fund regarding the valuation conditions?
So by definition, when you are looking for an investor, you don't know by advance what will be the condition you will accept. Huh? So there is no reason why we should be obliged as the EIC fund, because we are public money and so on, to say that the same condition will apply for any companies. It is a deal-by-deal thing. Yeah? So the only thing is that our investment strategy globally, what we were just discussing with Neely a few minutes ago, the fact that our main driver is not return on investment, the fact that we will ensure non-dilution on the capital, the fact that we'll never get more than 25% of the voting. All of this is or will be public in the coming days. Okay? Because it's very important, you're right. But for the rest, the other kind of conditions, of course, it's something which is a result of the discussion. Your second question is indeed a very important one, because you perfectly understood that the decision that there will be an equity investment is not taken by the EIC fund, it's taken by the jury. The jury is just saying, okay, there will be, and then the EIC fund is determining what and how. But of course, all of this can only be done if you have also an agreement with the applicant. I mean, the applicant has always the right to say no. Like today, by the way, you have the right to say no to a grant. Huh? Oh, yeah. But you gave the answer before me. Theoretically, you will have the right to say no to 4 million euro of equity. Theoretically, you have the right. And you have the right to say no to the conditions that we will propose, which as Yair mentioned it, and he did it with a lot of politeness and diplomacy, by not saying what could be the position of the VC world, which would be much more attractive than the private sector in reality. So you will have the right to say no. To be very clear with you, you have the right to say no. Does it mean that as a consequence, we will stop the grant support, which is a subsequent question? Not automatically, because it will depend on the assessment of the project, the deal as it is. If because suddenly you have not anymore the equity dimension, it changed totally or substantially the objective on which and the reason why the project was retained, there is a possibility that we will stop also the grant. Because again, it's not two different types of support, it's the same support with two different sources and means, but it's the same support. But it does not mean that it will be the case. Maybe we will consider that, no, okay, we understand. Nevertheless, it could make sense, nevertheless, to continue to provide the support in a grant. But there is a risk that indeed we stop everything because, and it's also a question of equal treatment. Because do not forget that already today, the SM instrument today is very competitive. Huh? So you have something like 3%, 4% chance to be retained, with 1/3 of the proposal being beyond the threshold, so normally deemed to be financed. So it means that 10% of the ones that are deemed to be financed are financed. So if, when you are within the 10%, or the 3%, you say at the end, no, I do not want, in fact, you take the possibility of ones that have not been retained, and it's not really fair, it's not an equal treatment. So normally if you decide to go for a blended finance, of course, the offers that must be done to you must be acceptable and fair. But normally it's because you are ready to accept that there will be an additional investor in your capital under fair condition.
And this investor can be not only, so if you are able to retain your own investment,
it could be
valid.
And you will, this afternoon Luis will very likely tell you, it could be that at the end it will not be us at all. Because when we will do the due diligence, and if you say, for example, I accept that you open it to other investors, imagine that there is one investor who say, oh, I go alone. It's a private one. No need for public sector to intervene. And therefore, we will not go. Very likely, the huge majority of the cases will be co-investment, and sometimes single investment on our side. But the single investment from the private sector may also happen.
Okay, 2 more questions. Yes, please. Unless you want to skip lunch.
Hi. Short question. How do you avoid conflict of interest once the European Commission is now going to have equity in some of these companies when you come to evaluate further companies in the same sector? So if the European Commission now does the blended and has an equity stake in a company, how do you avoid potential conflict of interest of the European Commission in checking out other companies in the same space?
It's very easy. We are never making the evaluation ourselves. Today, who is making the evaluation? The people that are not.
Yes, after you already made the investment in a company.
Yeah. So the company will be a company where we will have shares. Okay? Imagine they submit a proposal. Another one. They will make a. Imagine that they make a new proposal again. The first level of the evaluation is done by whom? By external experts that are not the Commission, never ever. And as you know from now 2 framework programs, we follow the recommendation of the experts. Okay?
Afterwards, you might
Yeah. Yeah, and how do you do when you have today, for example, in other member states, company where the state is involved? Let's take an example in my home country, Renault, famous automotive company. The French state is in the capital, 15% of the capital. Do you think that they are not receiving grants from the state of France? They are. And the evaluation is done by people from the outside world. So this is the only way to proceed. You have no other way to proceed. Does it mean that because of this, we will never intervene directly in the capital of company? Because what I would like to understand from your question is, how do you see the way to solve the issue yourself?
Probably making the body in the European Commission that holds the equity completely separate from...
And it is.
Like a completely...
But this...
Under the European Investment Fund or something, it's completely different.
It is.
That's not yet clear from
No, but it is, and it will be a separate entity. It will not be the commission per se as a legal entity that will invest in a company. As I told you, we are setting up a fund, EIC fund. But to be honest with you, the single owner of the fund at the very beginning will be the commission. Huh? No. Having said that, it allows me to build on your question, because our willingness, not in the pilot, to be honest, not in the pilot, but post-2020, is to attract other investors also at the level of the fund. Not only to co-invest with the fund, but to attract new money within the fund, which will solve a little bit the issue, but maybe not fully. We will remain very likely the most important shareholder. But I mean, the only way is to do it the way as I told you, to open it, and of course to ensure transparency. And
one question from that side, yes?
Speaking from the evaluator side, after seeing quite many proposals and knowing companies, I think one of the criteria for passing the threshold at least is having some former investment, either from the IIA, angels, or VCs, even small amount. How does it settle with the new paradigm that actually you're going after companies that never got anything from VCs or from anyone else?
But already today, I mean, as you said in the documents that are shared with the evaluators, this is an example which is provided in order to demonstrate that indeed the company was already able to attract. But it's not a mandatory criteria or condition. You have a number of companies that finally are going to the level of the jury, which have not yet an investor today. So tomorrow you will have also, and we do believe that there will be also companies that have not. The fact that they have already an investor is providing already an interest, some proof of evidence, let's say it this way, that you have an interest already from the market, maybe insufficient in order to be able to attract sufficient means to develop their whole business model. But at least there is already, so it's an element that is taken into account in the context of the evaluation, but it's not mandatory. So it will not change in the future.
We are going to Einat, last one from the academia. we need to have the...
Thank you. I was wondering, following Almeida's presentation, how are GDPR issues treated within the EIC?
Like everybody, like everywhere else.
So maybe, Ziv, how did you solve GDPR issues? Because it sounds very risky.
As part of the project, we need to have a GDPR compliance, and it's something that we complete until we start the first patient in the clinical validation study. So it's something that we actually started. We got a consultant from, as part of the SME, you got 12 days of consultants and experts, and we just spent 3 days with GDPR experts that came to Al-Maida and assist us with the procedure.
I'm sorry? Oh, okay. We are Ruti, do you want to say what's next? Maybe you'll say it more accurately than
we are a bit behind schedule, so we will take a shorter lunch break. We'll come back at 12:25, please, and then we'll have also the practical session for submitters. Thank you. Was quick and refreshing. We'll like to continue because we have a lot more information to hear. May I have please quiet? It's really hard to hear myself even with the mic. Thanks. So I would like to invite now Mr. Hanan Itzkovich, the VP Business Development at Tavlit, which is another Israeli company that won very recently the SME Instrument Phase 2, or in its new name, EIC Accelerator Grant, also to tell us about his experience. Thank you.
Afternoon. Indeed, we are one of the winners. I'll show you what we do and the road to get there. I'm the VP of Tavlit. Tavlit is a veteran of the irrigation and water industry world. We are supplying high-quality products around the world for more than 50 years. I'm sorry. We are known for keeping the whole value chain in the company, from the R&D to marketing. We are selling products in over 75 countries. And what's important, or most important here, is that we are working with companies in Europe from the early beginnings, over 45 years. Innovation is a key part in our strategy. And what we do is developing products. You can see a few of the 3,000 products we do. Some of them are patented, that saves water and energy. Under this hat, we invested in WaterSign. WaterSign is our daughter company that we submitted to Phase 2 and was awarded last October. What does WaterSign do? We do real-time monitoring of multi-users with a single sensor. It can be a water meter or a pressure sensor at the main inlet, and the system detects leakages, bursts, blockages, water theft, and unauthorized connection, points its location, and alerts immediately. We basically do online monitoring on the water system. We can take care of water safety. System alerts immediately when non-potable water enters potable water system. And we can do analyzing of water consumption patterns and alerting in case of irregular behavior, be in irrigation, be water supply, etc. Our uniqueness, and this is what we received the patent for, is that the water itself is used as the medium to transfer the data. We don't need transmission devices. We don't need cables. We use the water to transfer the information. What you can see down is one of our pilot sites and how we read. I know all of you not come from the water, but what you can see is how we take a combined signal and separate it with a smart algorithm. This is another example of what we do in agriculture. Agriculture obviously is a major user of water. With a single sensor located at the inlet of the field, we can monitor the whole field, tell you where you have bursts, leakages, or blockages, and you get the alert immediately to your cell phone or to your computer. And again, I'm pointing out the point of water safety because this can be a major issue in some cities, irrigation, etc. Now, we received the fund. It took a long and agonizing time. What are we going to do with the money? We are going to complete the development of the algorithm and the GUI, manufacture, mechanical, these are the devices we use. For the time being, we are using devices that we machine. We are going to do it in a more professional way in order to reduce cost. We will develop larger sizes of units, expand the system abilities, and we use some of the money to reach the market. As I showed you, our sister company has connections, and we are working with major customers all over the world. But this is a different technology. We need different partners. So we intend to do our pilot. This is part of the plan with major players, especially in Europe, and later we will look into the States, of course. And we'll go to exhibition, conferences, and my role in the company is to look for partners and look for the next investment. Now, here I put few points, here I put few points which I think are important if you want to win. First, you have to have a disruptive technology, a real game changer, which I believe we offered and we managed to convince the SME. Second, you need to know your market. I know it sounds obvious. It is not. You need to understand the potential. You need to understand your advantages. You need to know your competitors or companies that can be your competitors. You need to know your disadvantages. Now I'm doing some scouting for some companies. I did evaluation for startups, and some of us, we don't have disadvantages and we don't have competitors. Yes, we do. And you need to know it. And most important, what do the clients need and want? And we Israelis, and forgive me for generalizing, we don't really listen. Or most of the time we don't listen to our customers. I've been in the market for 35 years, so I know. Again, love your project. It shows. You love your project, you go and tell it, actually, we are selling the project to other people. It shows if you love your project or it's work. And again, be persistent. It took us 6 rounds, and we didn't give up, and we changed, and we learned, and there is a lady sitting here who knows how much time I've put and effort and the company in order to do it, and finally, we managed. But this is only halfway. And then you come to Brussels and you have 20 minutes. And this is your 20 minutes. Either you win or you lose. Make your presentation short and organized. Know what you're talking about. And be prepared. Time is short. And we came 3 people to present. And I was standing at the back. And I was watching the people who were listening. And I was watching the clock, because the clock is ticking. And in our case, I mean, we were prepared on everything. You could have asked me about competitors, about the market in the States, how you use your technologies in golf, what other people do. I had it all in mind. And most of the time was supposed to be invested on the business plan and the market. Surprisingly, 2 of the people that evaluated us liked the technology, and 12 minutes out of the 20, you see, I remember it, were dedicated to technology and technological questions. So be prepared and be patient, of course. Teamwork is essential, and of course, bring samples of video clip. We had to prepare a special video clip because our device is quite huge. What next? Winning phase 2 is only the beginning. Yes, we have the money. Yes, we became from a garage company into a company. We just recruit 3 people, senior people. We have a whole team. But this is only the beginning. You need to utilize the project to create partnership and ventures, because as was mentioned here before, this is the start and we are a startup. And we are looking for money, and our goal is to turn it into a real business. So look for partners, look for joint ventures, look for people that have strengths where you are weak. It could be marketing, it can be part of the R&D. Whatever you feel you're not too strong, find your partners. And you have to have a go-to-market strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hanan. It's always very good to learn from experiences of others. So now we are going on to the practical workshop for submitters for the EIC, also a Pathfinder and also Accelerator. So I'm happy to invite first Mr. Bart van Caneghem, I hope I said the name correctly, which is the head of sector project management in the Research Executive Agency in the unit of Novel Ideas FET Open. Thank you.
Yep, good afternoon. Thank you very much for hosting us here. It's a real pleasure for us to come and explain the practical details of this enhanced EIC pilot. So indeed, we will focus more on the practical instruments and the calls, so to give you a bit more background, but still we will not go into the full detail as well. So this would lead us really too far. But if you have more questions afterwards, there is a Q&A session and you can always contact us afterwards as well. So this morning was more on the policy level. It was the introduction, the idea of the EIC, why did we create it, the purpose of it, how it evolved, the reason also of setting up the pilot already now, to do an early start. And what's behind this is indeed this question, who will lead the next wave of breakthrough and disruptive innovation? And we in Europe, we really want to play a role in this. So if you look at the disruptive technologies from the past over the current and the future, the question will indeed be who will be leading the next wave of innovations, the next wave of disruptive innovations and changes in the society and in the economy. And so Europe wants to play a role in that, and of course also together with you, we would like to do this. So the Pathfinder is the part of the EIC actually that really wants to look for these disruptive innovations, these disruptive ideas. And so the deep tech made in Europe, how can we achieve this? It needs a strong research base. The deep tech companies, they constantly push on the technological frontiers, and that requires a lot of collaborations, and now more and more across different disciplines. So interdisciplinary research is really the key nowadays. Fundamental research and also then industrial applications. So the high challenges in this area of deep technologies is really the high risk, the complexity of the technology, also the long-term to market. And so this is the gap that we want to fill with this EIC, the challenge that we want to address with the EIC, to create the facilities to enable you to be successful in deep technologies in Europe and in Israel also. This has led to this EIC ID for the European Innovation Council in Horizon Europe. And as Jean-David explained this morning, the Commissioner wanted us to start with the pilot already now. So in 2019 and 2020, we have this enhanced pilot, and we pool together some existing instruments that we have already in Horizon Europe. And we have called it the Pathfinder and the Accelerator. And they should go smoothly from one to the other and create this one-stop shop for innovators and entrepreneurs and risk-taking entrepreneurship to be successful in new disruptive technologies. So the Pathfinder is based on the FET program, the Future and Emerging Technologies program. The two parts of it, the open, which is the bottom-up part, and also the FET proactive part. And the Accelerator pilot is based on the SME instrument and the fast track to innovation. And after me, my colleagues Cornelius and Louis will talk about the Accelerator pilot. Myself, I will now go more in detail on the Pathfinder pilot. So altogether, so they are both in the EIC enhanced pilot, and all the beneficiaries from the Pathfinder as well as from the accelerator. They can benefit from coaching, mentoring, and business acceleration services to create this smooth follow-up of these innovative ideas and technologies to be successful and to bring them closer to market. Also, horizontally, there are some EIC Horizon prizes and support actions to support the ecosystem to be successful. So I will focus on the major novelties as well, so that are in this enhanced pilot and which were not foreseen originally in Horizon 2020, but that have really been coming forward as a consequence of also our high-level group of innovators that have supported us in setting up this EIC pilot. So one of the novelties is this idea of the EIC program managers, like Jean-David also explained this morning. We are calling for 5 program managers, and they will follow up the EIC Pathfinder projects in portfolios. So they will take care, they will look after portfolios of projects, and this will be professionals with visionary thinking, and they should help to become more successful, to get more results emerging from these Pathfinder projects. They will take them along and nurture them to become also indeed more successful. This program manager, they will be hired as temporary commission staff. Another novelty is the newly set up EIC Advisory Board. It was announced last year, and this morning you have also seen the pictures of the members. So there are 22 members. They are from all sides. They are representing all stakeholders of the EIC, so that includes entrepreneurs, investors, individuals building startup communities, innovative researchers, and also academics, of course, working on innovation policy. So we are covering all the stakeholders for this European Innovation Council. And they will support the Commission to develop the pilot in 2019 and 2020, but then also to set up the strategy in Horizon Europe. For the EIC Pathfinder, so it's based on the future and emerging technologies. The main novelties here, so it's from early stage proof of concept research up to demonstration of commercial viability. And so the FET Open is the bottom-up part, which is not thematic, but also the FET Proactive part is now integrated into the Pathfinder, and there are some thematics. And I will come to these thematic calls that will be called for in 2019 and 2020. So we will also work with the program managers. All the beneficiaries have access to business acceleration services, where they will be able, for instance, to pitch technologies to investors or to other companies, to attend corporate days, so to have indeed pitching opportunities. So these are all services that are facilitating them to bring their research closer to market also, and to expose it to other stakeholders. Also new is an instrument to FET transition to innovation activities. I will come back to that as well. So this is also part of this enhanced pilot. For the future and emerging technologies, the bottom-up part, which is the core part of the EIC Pathfinder, what we call for are, what we are looking for are really foundations for radically new future technologies that are high risk and high impact interdisciplinary research. This may look very open, but therefore we have kind of gatekeepers. What we are really looking for is that there should be a radical vision behind it, a radical vision for a new technology, for doing things differently. Another point is that there should be a breakthrough technological target. It should really focus on technology. It should not be purely science research, but it should really be focused on creating a new technology. And it should be ambitious and interdisciplinary research. So this interdisciplinarity is also very important. Sorry. So this topic is bottom-up and continuously open, and there are 2 more calls following. I will present the call deadlines later, but one is in September and the other one is next year. What we are expecting when you submit a proposal is a 15-page proposal. So we keep it relatively short. We don't want too much paperwork. But it should really be focused. It should really be very good. As I explained, as the people from that has won the SME grants, as they said, the competition is very fierce. So it's very important that every detail is covered. So also this is also the case in our case. So in the beginning of our calls, we had a low success rate of around 5%. Now it's better. It's going up to 10, 12%. But still, the competition is very high. Typically, these projects are projects with an EU contribution of 3 million euro. And consortiums should have at least 3 partners from 3 EU or associated countries. The FET proactive part, this is the part with thematic topics. Here we have identified emerging paradigms, and we want to stimulate on these emerging communities with these goals. So it's stimulation of the emergence of new technological paradigms. For 2019, we have selected 3 of such paradigms. That's human-centric artificial intelligence, implantable autonomous devices and materials, breakthrough zero emissions energy generation for full decarbonization. And then for 2020, we have another 3 topics: future technologies for social experience. So this may lead to the next social media applications. Measuring the unmeasurable for sub-nanoscale science for nanometrology, and digital twins for the life sciences. And this is related to having models, dynamic models that can for actually avoiding that you have to do tests on the real sample, on the real people, or the real science, the real life science. Actions here can be up to 4 to 5 million, and they can go up to 4 years. But this is indicative, so it's depending on your project. Really, it can still be different than these figures here. So they are just given as indicative figures. Proposals here can be up to 30 pages, so this is the page limit. And also here there is a minimum of 3 partners from 3 EU or associated countries. So this is typically collaborative, interdisciplinary research. Another topic in 2020 is on environmental intelligence. It's to stimulate the emergence in Europe around the emerging paradigm of environmental intelligence. And there are 2 subtopics here: new techniques for creating and using dynamic models of environmental evolution. And another one, radically novel approaches to resilient, reliable, and environmentally responsible in situ monitoring. And the focus is here on water and air quality, actually. Also, projects can be up to 4 million euro. They are for collaborative research, so minimum 3 partners. But typically it can go up to 5, 6, 7 partners. Then there are 2 topics that are in between these interdisciplinary research projects, and then also the take-up for commercialization. And this is this one, the FET Open Innovation Launchpad. The idea here is to turn results from FET-funded projects into societal or economic innovations. These are very small projects. It's only up to 100,000 euro for a period of maximum 18 months. And here, sole applicants are allowed. So this can be mono-beneficiary projects. The purpose is not to do further research here, but it's rather to do activities like market analysis, business case, technology assessment, IP protection. And the purpose is that the results from the from previous FET projects are brought closer to market. And it's not necessarily by the people who actually are the owner of these results. It can also be external entrepreneurs. And if they get the access rights to the IP, they can also bring this FET results closer to market. So it's not an obligation that the people were beneficiaries in the projects and in the original projects. So there is here a scope also for new entrepreneurs and other CEOs or other companies to take up these results and bring them closer to market. Well, actually, what we do in these interdisciplinary research projects is also that we use a kind of a methodology. We call it the innovation radar. And there is an innovation expert that helps the beneficiaries to identify very promising results that can be further exploited. And alone by doing this, it is insensitizing the researchers to think about how to exploit their research. And this can then result in actually a submission of such a project, and it can actually convince some of these researchers to take their own results closer to market and to become entrepreneurs themselves. So this is giving this opportunity, and this is exactly also what we want to achieve within the European Innovation Council, that they can smoothly go from their research into entrepreneurship. But as I said, it doesn't need to be the researchers themselves, it can also be other people. Another new topic now is this one. It's a transition to innovation activities. Here the budget is higher than in the previous topic. So the budget can here be 1 to 2 million euro, and this one can still include research. So it's to turn promising results into breakthrough and disruptive innovations. It can be based on any FET Open or FET Proactive projects from Horizon 2020. And it's, here there is a focus on these technologies that are mentioned here. I'm not going to read them out, but it's still very wide, as you can see. So here are the next cutoffs. So for the FET Open bottom-up call, the next call is on the 18th of September. It's for a budget of 160 million euro. And so this can result, that will probably result in more than 50 projects. The next cutoff then within the enhanced EIC pilot is in May 2020. For the topic of the emerging paradigms and communities, there is the first top 3 areas. The deadline is 8th of October. The next one is 22nd of April. For environmental intelligence, it's also 22nd of April. For the innovation launchpad, there are still 2 deadlines, one in October this year, the other one October next year. And for the very new topic, transition to innovation activities, the deadline is also on the 8th of October 2019. Regarding the evaluation criteria, so within Horizon 2020, there are 3 evaluation criteria. It's excellence, impact, and the quality and efficiency of implementation. As you can understand, in the Pathfinder, the emphasis is really on the research and on the disruptive technologies. And so we are very focused on identifying the excellence in the proposals. The radical vision has to be really very promising. The proposed research has to be very good. The interdisciplinarity and so on has to be very good. Therefore, in the weighting of the scores, the excellence is much higher than for the other criteria. So for the FET Open and FET Proactive research and innovation actions, 60% is put on the excellence criterion. For the 2 other topics that are then actually taking FET results further, there is 40% on excellence, and here there is already more emphasis on the impact, also 40% on impact. The time to inform and the time to grant is, these are the normal timelines as for Horizon 2020, 5 months and 8 months. And I would like to finish on the Pathfinder part with this testimonial of a success case. So this is the CEO and co-founder of Ensfero. And he has developed a platform to test new drugs without animal testing, without the need of animal testing. And it was thanks to his participation in fat-open projects and in collaborative research with academia and with other researchers that he was successful in developing this innovation for his company. So, even if I stress that indeed it's very much on research, it's open to all type of beneficiaries, so academia, research, industry, so everybody can really participate. And here I would like to finish with some links, and then I would like to hand over to the colleagues for the accelerator part.
Okay, thank you also from my part for the invitation and for hosting us here in this very nice environment with this very, not only big, but I think also very well-informed audience. It's a pleasure. I think I can reassure you that my presentation will be the shortest presentation of the day. I will briefly recap basically the EIC accelerator basic elements. You will then hear from my colleague Louis more detail about what is probably most on your mind, the blended finance option, the EIC fund, and the specifics for the equity part. But here, so just very briefly, to recap for the EIC accelerator pilot, now in the enhanced pilot, the accelerator provides innovators and innovative companies with now with blended finance, grants only, or grants and equity of up to a total of 17.5 million euros. And it is supposed to bridge the financing gap between late-stage innovation activities and market take-up. It very much builds on the SME instrument that you know and like. It is targeted to individual SMEs with high risk and high growth potential, aimed at shaping new markets or disrupting existing ones. It provides substantial funding for the last stages of development. It is bottom-up, no more topics, no more predefined sectors, targeting all sectors, products, services, and new business models. It provides a grant that is unchanged of up between 0.5 and 2.5 millions, also unchanged with a funding rate of 70% of the total costs of the project. So 30% need to be available from capital of the company. Now, new is an equity option of up to 15 million euros, which the company can also ask for. The grant is for the early stages of innovation for development, so that's for TRLs 1 to 6, and the equity is then for the early stage and mature, sorry, forget what I just said, it's for the early stage innovation of development. Louis, it's up to TRL, was that correct? 6 was correct. Okay, so it was correct what I said. Equity is for the later stages that are closer to commercialization. Importantly, in the application, you will have an option to tick that allows the evaluators to transform your application for grant into equity. If they see that that you're asking for funding for activities that are higher than TRL 6, so that cannot be covered by a grant, that will allow them to transform that from grant into equity. If you don't take that option, the only possibility is that this part of the grant will be simply diminished. So you can only gain by ticking the option that allows you to transform that into equity. The accelerator pilot, here the evaluation criteria have been very slightly adapted. You know the 50%, 25%, and 25%, but de facto it is actually not a big change because part of what used to be the impact criterion is now in the criterion on the quality and efficiency of implementation. We have something on bankability and on the risk taken that is now part of the implementation criterion. So de facto, we do continue to put a big emphasis on impact. This is kind of a transition to what is planned in Horizon Europe for the EIC, where we have this clearer, also with 1/3 for each, but where the implementation criterion is again extended towards the risk-taking, which now at the moment, in the past, was considered under the impact criterion. We continue to have a very short time to inform. We inform the applicants within 4 months from the date of the deadline, and we remain committed to signing the grant part within 6 months from the deadline, from the cutoff. The equity, as Jean-David mentioned before, might take typically up to 1 month longer. We start with the negotiation of the equity part also, of course, immediately as soon as we have taken the decision for funding, but this might, because of the due diligence, take a little bit longer than the grant application. As Jean-David mentioned, I think Luis will tell you in more detail, they are different, so the decision about both is taken at the time of the evaluation. There's one single evaluation, I also come to this, but then we will have an additional process of due diligence and about the how and when of the equity that will then lead to a separate equity agreement. But of course, again, they will be managed in close cooperation, the grant agreement and the equity agreement. So this is what you know, nothing new here, submission of proposals. We have cutoffs roughly every 3 months. Luis will have a slide with the remaining cutoffs until end of 2020. We have a remote evaluation. We then have the jury, the interview. You've heard testimonial this morning. And then we have within 2 to 3 months after the information, the grant agreement signed. The novelties are that we have a single template for the 2 options. The applicants that are positively evaluated for blended finance may be asked for additional information on their equity request in the course of the due diligence. We have new application forms for everybody, which request some additional financial elements from all applicants. And we have a slightly revised pitch deck for the interview. And I think this is already the last or second last slide. So no changes. We have no changes in principle. We continue to have the remote evaluation, the face-to-face interview with the jury. And instead of 2 possible outcomes, we now have a 3rd option. So we have a go decision or a no-go decision. And then, as I mentioned, in those cases where applicants for a grant-only option have elements in their application that cannot legally be financed by our grants because they are beyond TRL 6, then the jury also has the option to recommend the change into blended finance from grant only if that box has been ticked in your application. And that's it. And I'm sure there are many questions, but I would suggest that we really keep them for the panel discussion and that I hand over to Luis, who also might answer some of these questions.
So, well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm gonna pick up where my colleague left the presentation. So, here. So, maybe 1 minute to clarify for everybody, because I don't know if everybody in the room is totally familiar with the TRL terminology. It's part of our jargon. We use this all the time, but I don't know if everybody because I think it's important. And I think I had this slide. This is very simple. So, for example, the pathfinder that was explained by my colleague Bart at the beginning is covering TRL 1 to 5, more or less. So we are starting with the ID, just an ID, a brilliant ID normally, very disruptive. And we support the research that still needs to be done to move this ID to later stages. Later stages means, for example, research to prove the feasibility, technology development. So we are step by step trying to approach like a proof of concept. Later on, we will go for a prototype, and this is the kind of TRL, so technology readiness levels, that we manage to somehow try to clarify what we are looking for. Of course, there are a lot of gray zones in this classification. Sometimes it's not very clear, it's TRL 4, 3, but it's an approximation. For us, for the accelerator part, that is the part that I'm going to explain right now, we are starting in TRL 6. So the technology has been already demonstrated in the lab environment. So it's working. We have a proof of concept. We now can move to the prototype. And we have here an issue with the TRL 8 and TRL 9 that I would like to clarify as much as possible, because it's also part of the equity rationale, not all, but part of how it's distributed. So with the grant part, we cover TRL 6 to TRL 8. This is because of the state aid rules. So it's understood that grants can distort the market. So grants only can help, which is understood to be still technology development, no market commercialization activities. TRL 9 and other activities beyond are more supposed to be in the let's say in the stage of the commercialization. TRL 9, for example, is that the system, the product, the service is working in the operational environment. So we really have a product that really achieves the goals in terms of productivity, in terms of consumption, in terms of price that we really promised in the previous stages. So TRL 9 and beyond cannot be covered, cannot be supported with grants, but can be supported by the capital of the company that we provide with the equity. Having said that, I would like also to clarify that the equity can be also applied to the other TRLs, 6, 7, and 8, but not the opposite, not the contrary. Grant only TRL 6, 8, equity TRL 6, and 9, and beyond. Even more, I would like to stress the fact that it is possible now to apply under the blended option to use the capital, the equity, to cover the 30% of the grant part. So the grant intensity, the funding rate of the grant is 70%. So the company has to provide the other 30%. This other 30% can be also taken from the equity, from the capital provided also by the commissions through the blended finance. So, well, step by step, I may understand that sometimes it may be a bit difficult to digest all the things, but with the questions, if it's not clear now, we can come back to this if needed. Okay. So we were here. It has been clearly explain how the system works. Is very similar to what we did with the SME instrument phase 2 with the current system until 5th of June. The evaluation, now after the jury evaluation, we have projects proposals with Go. So they go for the grant agreement preparation and the signature in the time frame that is here represented. But for those asking for the blended finance, so and I would like to stress again that it's an option. You can ask for you can apply for the grant only, or you can apply for the grant plus equity. For those with the Go decision, they have to undergo the due diligence. That is this process. So first I would like to stress, to highlight the fact that I think it was many times repeated by Jean David, but I would like to say again that the due diligence is not the usual due diligence made by a VC, because the decision is already taken. After the jury, we have already a decision that the project is going to be funded. So the due diligence is not going to reevaluate the project, is not going to challenge the decision of the jury, but it's going to really define the parameters of the investment. Because the jury said, go, okay, it makes sense for the Commission to invest in this company, equity. But now we need to really define the financial effort, the total financial effort, the number of tranches of installments, the milestones that the company has to cover to be the money disbursed. So this is the kind of things that the due diligence is going to try to define, to determine. And not only that, because, well, at the end we are a public body, and we have, of course, to also keep an eye on the reputation of the Commission. So first we need to make some initial checks. It's like a pre-due diligence to really see that there is no any kind of fraud, of misrepresentation, of money laundering, of many basic things that normally we don't check at this stage. But with the due diligence, we do that. We want to know more about really the company. The other part has been already said, but well, one of the things, and I understand questions related to, well, the level of uncertainty and so on. Well, we are trying to do something tailor-made, and this is one of the drivers of the EIC, is to try to define a solution for each company, because each company is different, the product is in a different stage, the market is different, the sector is different, the team is different, the structure of the company is different. So we really need to go deeper into the details to really define the best solution for the company and for the goals of the Commission. The kind of information is provided initially in the submission form. So in the template that you will have to fill in when you are applying, you will also provide part of this information, because now you have an access in Excel, an Excel sheet to provide financials and your predictions for the future and so on. But in any case, during the process, the EIC fund may ask for more information. I will come back to who will be the entity managing the EIC fund, but it will be a fund created and set up by the Commission with the support of the EIB group. It will be the Commission at the end and the expert people who will do this due diligence. So the kind of information that we'll be looking for will be financial, of course. I mentioned it already. More related to the market, product, competition, the marketing plan, the sales, the IPR, the management and the staffing, legal and related matters. So all of this to try to define the conditions that we are going to offer to the company. Well, as part of this due diligence process, there is a matchmaking analysis or a matchmaking action to try to engage with other investors. It has been mentioned many times that we would like, ideally, the position the Commission would like to be is to have other investors on board. So how do we do that? Sometimes the company can bring their own investor, but many times, because of the high risk of the company, they have not been successful to find the investor. So we will create a community of trusted, let's say, trusted VCs and investors, trusted because are the community of investors that we are working with already through the Juncker plan, as Jean-David mentioned, Innofin, and the other financial products that we have managed by the EIB and the EIF. So this initial 250 investors will be part of that platform, and we will upload there the information, a basic information on the companies that we have already selected for the equity. And we will try to foster the engagement between them to see if really there is an interest to be investor of that company, with the different cases Jean-David mentioned this morning. So it may be, I'm just interested but not willing to come in now. I'm really interested, I would like to invest in this company. And there will be a panoply of different situations that are, I think, perfectly understandable, and the role of the Commission will be different according to the proactivity of the different co-investors or potential investors. In any case, I think the last sentence applies. The company will have the final say, because it's not only about the willingness to invest, but also about the conditions. Sometimes, well, in principle, the EIC fund wants to be founder-friendly, in the sense that we want to help the founders, the innovators, so the conditions of the Commission in some cases could be different from the standard VC. So after the due diligence take place, and we said that it could be triggered no later than 1 month after the jury decision, the interview decision, and could take at the most 6 months. We say 6 months because the other time, last week in another EIC roadshow, someone told me 6 months is a lot. It is. We have been told in other occasions that we have to be realistic. A due diligence takes 6 months. So, well, again, it's indicative. Of course, we would like to reduce the time as much as possible, but we understand, on the other hand, that we have to be on the safe side, and we have to take into account that, well, we will be really going to investors. They may or may not express an interest to be in touch with the company. They will ask for more information, because the information provided at the beginning will be limited. But if the investor has an interest and the company really gives permission, they can provide more information. They will have to talk. We, in parallel, will be asking for more information. So there will be a negotiation. This takes time, so to be realistic, really. So, well, it's an indicative time on how long it could take. Well, as I and Jean David anticipated, the EIC fund is not a typical venture capital. Even if I would like to say and to remark that in many occasions we will stick to the standard methodologies that are applied generally in the sector, for example, for valuation or for other kind of questions. So, but the differences, I think, are more in the sense of we are not revenues or returns driven, but impact driven. So what we really want is the companies to be successful and to go to the market and to really create new jobs or solve a societal challenge. So revenues for us will be recycled, so will be re-injected like a revolving fund, especially in Horizon Europe. I don't know exactly under the pilot because we have different rules, but in Horizon Europe, from 21 on, the EIC will be fully fledged, so we will have the rules that we would like really to fit better on the thing we want to have. And of course, we have been explaining sometimes during the morning the relationship between the grant and the equity, so there will be an impact. For us, at the end, what we expect from you, if you are thinking of being an applicant, is a comprehensive and consistent project when you explain how you are going to use the grant for the development of the technology to the TRL 8, and how you are planning to use the equity part for completing the development of the technology, but especially we want to see how you plan to get to the market. So this is, at the end, what we are expecting, and which is the... So if in any point of this process you are not successful to really explain why you don't want the equity, or you are not, or we fail to get the equity, how this affects, may affect to the grant part, the important thing is to understand that for us it's a project as a whole. And I think this is important to keep it in mind. Well, the agreement will be a separate agreement as part of the grant agreement. So we will launch the grant agreement, will be signed, you will receive the pre-financing of the grant agreement to start the development of the technology, and months later we will have an addenda to the agreement, let's say a separate agreement with the investment part after the due diligence, negotiations, and so on. Of course, we will be advised by experts, but I think it's clear, but I would like to say again that the Commission will have the last say. This EIC fund has been especially conceived and will be set up particularly to the fact that the Commission will have the last decision, even if we will be supported by experts. The role that the Commission will play in the company is a passive role, but well, not I could like not to say passive in the sense that we will be helping the company to attract more investors, because since the very beginning, as you saw, so since the very beginning, since the due diligence, we will be asking the market if they are willing to be co-investors with the Commission. So in that sense, we will be very active. And in any case, the Commission wants to be active in, at the extent that the company requests this involvement in the activity of the company. So in principle, as Jean-David said, the Commission will not go further to 25% of the voting rights. So we will have normally an observer in the board, but we don't want to be involved in the decisions or in the daily management of the company. We will provide mentorship in the case that we are the sole investor, but normally we would like to have this mentorship provided by the co-investor, by the leading investor, if this is the case, or by an investor that is interested in the company, not ready to go to invest now, but maybe in the future. So he wants to be, or she wants to be, a mentor for the company, and the company, of course, agrees on that. The exit strategy, as Jean-David said, is as soon as possible. Nevertheless, if the company wants the Commission to stay and is justified, we will consider to stay longer. But in principle, as soon as another investor wants to come in, we will opt out. Of course, the different routes will be the normal routes that there are in the market. So maybe IPOs, trade sales, management buyout, or liquidation, bankruptcy, many. Of course, we would like to opt out whenever the company is very successful, but, well, we understand that with these high-risk companies, in many occasions, we will have a failure, and otherwise, we would be doing something wrong if all the companies are very successful. Okay. So jumping to the business acceleration services that were mentioned before, I think it's an important point because, well, you all know that money is not is very important, but it's not all about money. So we will be providing now business acceleration services extended to all the EIC clients, even for the EIC Pathfinder pilot. We will be providing 12 days of coaching for the SMEs, but also, and I think this is important, to connect with the Pathfinder and to also show that this is the EIC is an entire project that we would like to help those people that are around the project or are absolutely newcomers, entrepreneurs that want to benefit or to take the ideas coming out of the solutions coming out from the Pathfinder to create a spin-off, of course, with the agreement of the owners of the EIP and the promoters of the project and so on, but to help them to create a spin-off and explode further the results and to step by step move forward to towards the accelerator. Mentoring, I mentioned mentoring previously, and we already have a community platform for sharing best practices, but also to look for partners, to look for potential clients or providers. And networking events that I think they are working very well because offer to some of the SME instrument beneficiaries the opportunity to pitch in front of, for example, corporates, to go to exhibitions, but it's not easy for an SME sometimes to pitch in front of the real client, potential targeted client. So I think this is a very good option. And we are still working with the KICS, with the EIT, to see also how we can even find the synergies between our business acceleration services and the services provided by the KICS in very particular sectors. So you have 5 opportunities. It's continuously open, you know, so you can submit electronically the application. Next cutoff, so we will collect all the applications coming in until the 9th of October for the first evaluation, and we will launch the process of remote evaluation, jury, due diligence, and so on. So we expect to have the first equity investment to happen around the spring of the next year. And you will have another 4 additional opportunities under this pilot, because then we will have the EIC under Horizon Europe. A bit and a small mention to another 2 products, let's say, of the EIC. One is Fast Track to Innovation, the FTI. I think it's an interesting option also for those. Is pure only grant. This is a grant. But there still is an opportunity for those that really need to work with corporate, for example, with other SMEs, require some research. So it's consortium driven, so you need to have a consortium, a small consortium, maximum 5 partners from 3 EU or associated countries. Mandatory, and not only mandatory, the involvement of the industry. I think is 60% of the money has to go to the industry, and you have coming cutoffs with 3 million. So to come back to the TRL. We are talking about more or less the same TRL from 5, 6 to the market. But this could take more time, a little bit of more money in terms of the grant, and with a consortium. So it's a different approach for those that have in mind this another possibility. And we have also a number of prices. These are inducement prices. So this means that it's not a price to acknowledge or to some solution or discovery, is to try to incentivize quick solutions to really relevant challenges that our society has. So there is a number of challenges that the Commission has identified, and there is a substantial money for those prices for individual companies or for any applicant, in fact, to come up with a solution to these challenges. Well, all this information is going to be available for you. It's on the website. You will find more details. The only I would like to stress is that deadlines are approaching soon. So if you are thinking of using a window of opportunity here, please go to the website and see how you can make a proposal in all these different topics. So, well, I think from my side is okay. Same links and available for question now. Thank you very much.
So now we'll have a quarter of an hour of Q&A. I wanted to invite, but you are quicker than my invitation, so thanks. Okay. So now we'll pass on. We have a quarter of an hour for a few questions.
Hello, my name is Erez Mutzafi. I'm from Royal Green. We are doing smart environmental monitoring. We have a system that we are selling today. The things that we are apply on the Horizon 2020 are new one. So the TRL is determined according to what we have, or only the things that we want to add to the system?
No, the TRL is about what you intend to do in the project. So the money that you apply to, what you will use it for. So that's what will determine the TRL. Is that an answer to your question? Or?
There are some samples winning programs?
Yes, online. Yeah, so they should all be available with a small delay on Corda, on the sorry, on Cordis, on the sorry.
There are also all the SME winning projects and all the FDI winning projects. There are data hubs, SME Instrument Data Hub, FDI Data Hub. So you can see a lot about winning projects from the past in a few sources.
Hi. At one point you said that in the grant there's a 70% funding and 30% is the responsibility of the company. Is that also true with respect to the equity component in the blended one and also true in the Fast Track to Innovation Consortium?
Yeah, it's true. So for this kind of innovation actions, the funding rate is always 70%. So the other 30% has to be provided by the company. What I said is that there is the possibility in the blended finance, in the equity part, to apply, to use part of the money of the equity to cover the 30% remaining. So this possibility only for the blended, obviously. For the grant only, or for the FTI that is a pure grant, you will have to look other ways to provide that money.
I have a question. I understood the follow-up from the FET Open into big success in the market. That's very clear. In one of Jean Malot's slides, you mentioned also the ERC winners. We have now the proof of concept in the ERC. Are you also going to be investing in that?
I think the proof of concept in the ERC remains a complementary program that has similar goals, which is not formally part of the EIC. So they are complementary, but not, at the moment, there's no direct link between the two.
No, exactly. This is the right answer. But under Horizon Europe, in the future, what the Commission is intending to do is to try to to facilitate some kind of fast track from other programs, not only from the Commission, but also from the national programs for the Israel Innovation Authority, for example. So in a way that, well, this will have to be determined how it's going to work, but in a way that projects coming out from the EIC, for example, can have some kind of fast track to go to the accelerator, provided that the excellence has been already taken for granted because it comes from the EIC. So probably this will be the point that will have to be clarified, if, what is the level of quality for any other programs outside. But there will be that possibility in the future because, well, at the end, the pipeline is not only the pathfinder for us, it's much bigger.
Hello, my name is Alon Breyer from Derionics. On the vector that you presented for the technologies that you're searching for, I did not see smart agriculture. I wanted to understand where you are on that, if it's in your focus.
Smart agriculture? Yeah. So, yeah. Good point. Yeah, exactly. It's bottom up. It's fully bottom up. Because I think we mentioned that, but probably it's very good that the question came up because, yeah, it's fully bottom up. So no sectorial, no topics predefined. So of course, smart agriculture is very welcome, and you could see an example of monitoring agricultural parameters in the example of Tablet was, I think, the name of the company. So of course that is perfectly eligible. provided that the solution is disruptive.
Hello, my name is Levi Wiener. I wanted to ask, please, if the due diligence for the investment part for equity is going to be done remotely, or how is it going to be done in this month that you say that you'll finish it? I mean, it's...
Yeah, okay. Well, in principle, information will be requested, will be remotely analyzed, but I for sure foresee some kind of face-to-face meetings. 1, 2, I don't know exactly. Probably many part of this will be relying on the new systems of communication and so on, but some kind of direct contact with the founders, I think it's obvious that we will have to do something, I don't know if physically or virtually, but yeah, some kind of relation, yeah. It's a negotiation, in part.
Dave first.
Okay.
I would like to come back to the question about 70% finance option for grant only. On the website of EIC, it says that there's also some percentage for overhead. How does it fit to the picture? It says 70% grant and overhead.
So it's a 70% grant, but there's a 25% overhead on your direct costs that is also included. That's for all of Horizon, the same.
Yeah, it's a flat rate.
Okay, I wanted to, my name is Sharon Zimmerman. I wanted to ask a question about the evaluation. Are the evaluation criteria going to be changing from what they were under the phase 2, or is it going to be the same evaluation criteria?
So the detailed so the basic criteria remain excellence, implementation, and impact. We have, as I showed, we have slightly changed the weighting of these criteria, and we have also adapted the sub-criteria of each criteria. They are published in the work program that was published yesterday or the day before yesterday. So I don't have a slide with all of the sub-criteria. The principal message is that there's no revolutionary change, but there have been some small changes which you can see in the published work program.
Okay, and if I can just ask also, I know that there's been a lot of criticism of the evaluation process, a lot of subjectivity and a lot of inconsistencies in the evaluation. Is anything being done to correct that?
So I think that you will not expect anything else that I will say that our evaluation system, of course, is not perfect, as no evaluation system in the world is, but I think our evaluation system is absolutely on par with international standards. We have observers that look at our evaluation system objectively that come from other major funding organizations and that have so far given us a very clean bill on that we have experts that really know what they're doing, that we have processes that allow these experts to express themselves and to find in the jury opportunity to discuss these things. So I think that we have a good evaluation system. We're grateful for if you have suggestions on how concretely to improve it, I'll be happy to discuss that. Unfortunately, not today because I need to go back to the airport. But I think we're open for suggestions. But for the moment, there are no changes in the system that we have established at the beginning of 2018 when we introduced the jury.
Hi, Ziv Gaddisfeld, HP Now. We've successfully concluded a phase 2. We're on the market, and we now have a next-gen product in the pipeline, and we'd be happy to submit a grant for that. My question is, if we consider blended, the business plan that we submit, would that be only for the new product, or would it be for the whole company?
Well, in principle, you may apply the equity for this product that you have, but I understand that the product is already in the market.
No, the first product is the market. There's a new product in the pipeline. We want to apply for a new grant for that. Okay. But then, if we go for a blended option, on the equity side, can we apply for the whole company, for the whole activities, or are we constricted to just the new product?
No, I can apply. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the business plan for the equity involves the whole activities of the whole company. Got it.
Good.
Thank you.
Hi. Over here? Yeah. For the budget that is allocated for 2019-2020 for the EIC Accelerator program, is there a split between the budget allocated for the grant only and the budget allocated for the blended? And if so, what would be, if you know, what would be the budget allocated for the blended option, like the equity part, and what would be for the grant only part?
Well, there is an indicative budget, yes, and there is a pre-allocation. But the Commission has the flexibility to change according to the demand, so there will be not two different rankings for the budget of the blended and for the other. Will be only one ranking, and it will be adapted according to the demand.
So basically, if you have more companies that suddenly fall in the blended, you will shift the budget. Because what's written on the site right now seems to have a very small budget for the blended. That's what I'm...
I think the only thing that is indicated in the work program is a minimum budget of 100 million for the...
That's what I was referring to, because that seems to be very small for the blended. If there's more companies that
As Louis indicated, we can modify that in this direction. We cannot use the 100 million for the equity, can only go to equity. That's the only restriction.
Got you. Just a quick follow-on on the blended project. If a company goes for the blended with TRL 9 and above, still limited to the 24 months?
For the blended, you mean?
For the blended project, if you do, it's not limited to 24.
For the equity?
Yeah, for the equity.
Yeah, no. No, the Commission, well, we will see. It depends on case by case. But in principle, the Commission expects to be in the company 7-10 years, 5, a little bit.
No, but I'm saying if a company submits a project now,
yeah,
it can submit a project for, say, 4 or 5 years if it goes for the equity part.
Yeah, okay, saying the same thing as Louis, I think, with different words. So you will have two separate agreements. The grant agreement will still be for 24 months. But as Louis said, the equity part will depend very much on a case-by-case basis. So there is no, so the project that you submit, I think in principle should be, I mean, since it is for the grant part, should be for 24 months. That doesn't prevent us holding equity longer than 24 months.
No, I'm not saying about the whole you holding equity, but when you present one single application, the whole project still is limited to the 24 months in the application.
I think
with the grant of it. That's because some companies can ask for equity for 10 million or something, and then they should probably use it for a longer period.
I think you have to present the project taking into account the real timeline you have for the equity part. For the grant is 24 months. I think that's clear. For the other part, you need and will be part of the definition of during the due diligence of the investment of the Commission to define the tranches, the timeline, the milestones. So will be part of the separate agreement that will be jointly put together with the other with the grant agreement.
We have time for one or more, 1.5 questions. Yes, please.
Okay, very quickly. So if I understood that TRL 9 is for equity only, correct? Okay, so if a company is successful, they pay you
not
back?
for equity only, but sorry,
blended
TRL.
TRL 9 is for equity only, correct? Okay, if a company is successful, they return the equity, the money that they borrowed from you, basically. That's correct? If they fail, if the company is high risk and there's a problem, okay, they receive this equity. Then
No,
it's not conditional?
It's not a loan.
That's a question. It's just, okay.
No, it's capital, so you don't have to return.
That's it, that's the question.
For the TRL 9, for any use you can make with the equity part, you don't need to return. There are other ways. There are the exits for this part of the investment of the Commission.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thanks.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask regarding the path from FET, let's say, all the way to equity. FET are projects that are that can be in the academia that are not even constituted, incorporated as a company, or even, or also FET projects have also be inside companies already.
Well, it could be a spin-off established with, from university, for instance, but it's for the accelerator, it's supposed to be SMEs. So indeed, it's not funding the academic institutions.
It can be very early stage, but it has to be incorporated as a company.
Exactly.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. And there are the extra facilities of business coaching and everything, and the business acceleration services to help on the path of making a spin-off. Yep.
I think we have to release both of you, right, to an early flight, but we have here 4 questions till 2 with Luis. So thank you very much, Bart and Cornelis. If there are any more questions about Accelerator, we can have a few more. Yes, please, someone has the mic.
It's actually about the FTI that you spoke about it. In discussion internally, I tend to understand that development for drug are not suitable for FTI. Development for drug development is not suitable for FTI. Can you comment on this?
Well, frankly speaking, I'm not an expert on FTI, and I don't know a very conclusive answer. So I prefer, if you don't mind, you can give me your contact and to come back to you if drug investigation research is eligible. I don't think there are any limitations by sector, but I don't know, frankly speaking.
Hi. Do you expect any changes in the success rate of the project, of the program? Difficult one.
It's a pilot. So I don't know. In principle, my experience is that at the beginning, when you introduce any kind of change, the first cutoff, normally the level of applications decreases a little bit, so the success rate increases. It is a very transitional situation. Okay. I think, apart from that, for example, when we introduced the interview, this situation took place. But after that, we are still in the same or even below success rates.
I'd like to ask several questions, if I may. Could you elaborate a bit between the, let's say, practical difference between TRL 8 and 9, whether it's a pilot in a working environment, whatever? If you could give just several concrete examples, it would be great. And the other question is, what happens if someone applies to the blended and fails? Can they reapply only to the part of the accelerator? That's it. Thanks.
Okay. So for the TRL, in principle, TRL 9 is when you really have a operational product. So, of course, you have the machine that is really producing something, and it's especially important that this production is in real conditions. So really, the productivity, all the targets you initially wanted to achieve are really achieved at the end. So the product is really in real conditions. So previous TRLs are always some kind of uncertainty already yet. Okay? I don't know if this answers your question. But in any case, I said there are some gray zones, and I think you can go, there are more information, will be more information also in our, we have a TRL definition in Annex G of our information, so you can also go there. For the second part, we really don't foresee many situations in which a company will fail in the equity, in the due diligence. And will be, for us, very extreme cases, as I said before, related to fraud, to misrepresentation, to very, on the other hand, logical situations where an administration, a public body like us, could not go for something, but there is evidence of fraud. So, taking these situations apart, that obviously automatically would terminate the whole thing including the grant part, of course, if there is fraud, for example. For the rest, well, the normal outcome will be a definition of the investment. In very rare case, I think there could happen that we can appreciate that the level of risk, for example, is lower for something, for some reason. Or for example, and on the other hand, the outcome is very successful. Imagine that we go to the investors, and there are many investors willing to invest. So really, the company was not so risky, let's say. So this would be the case in which the Commission probably will step out in this situation, but the grant could still remain because it makes sense, it's needed by the company to develop the technology, and for the growth, the investors are going to cover. So could be. So there is no an automatic rejection of the grant if the outcome of the due diligence is negative in that sense. So again, will be a case-by-case situation, more tailor-made, and there will be more interaction. And so I would like to be more prescriptive, but this is not the case.
Are part of the accelerators? Are they budgeted?
Yeah, it can be also part of the accelerator. Yeah. So it's a good question because, well, we have an internal discussion. This is the reason why I didn't want to give a very final answer to the FTI, because yes, clinical trial, it depends on many factors. Or well, so, and so let me not answer this question now and come back to you, because it's not the first time. And well, we wouldn't like to have some kind of prescription, because if we say clinical trials is TRL, we may be asked for everybody to say, well, please give us a list of all the TRL, all the activities in any sector that are, well, so this is one of the problems we have with this.
Issues related to marketing preparation, would that be included in the grant?
The what?
Such as
marketing. Oh, okay, yeah, why not? Yeah. Could be covered by the equity. Exactly, this kind of activities.
Just by the equity or by the grant?
No, by the equity.
Just the equity.
Yeah.
May I?
Yeah.
Marketing and sales preparations, such as establishing sales centers and publication and what? Regulation, issues like that. You see that as TRL 9?
Yeah, could be. 9 or beyond. So at the end, you have the freedom. The concept of eligible activities does not apply to the equity part anymore. In principle, you have to describe what you want to do with the money to get to the market. So any activity could be acceptable under the equity part, in principle,
so
provided that you justify.
In principle, it's just development. You move just to development of the product, to technology.
Yeah, but the development of the technology is covered by the grant part, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, to make that a bit sharper, if there are activities about that are connected to the prototype, looking for beta sites or marketing, activities that are connected to marketing a prototype, is it still, referred to as TRL 9 or it's TRL 6 because these are activities for not a yet finished product?
Okay, it could be, but in any case, I think this is a very good opportunity for me to explain the other point that was in the slides from my colleague Cornelius. So, I said at the beginning that there are some gray zones with the TRLs, and we are addressing the kind of questions. So, I think it's good, or I would recommend to really tip the point where you give permission to the Commission to change from grant only to equity if there are activities that you consider that are TRL 8 because of those gray zones, and at the end, the jury, the evaluation, consider that are TRL 9. So, if you are thinking in applying to the blended part, no problem. So, probably we will redefine for you to say, well, this is not TRL, so we will have to reduce the grant part and move these activities to the other part. But if you are thinking in applying to the grant part and you include activities that are clearly beyond TRL 9, you can give us the consent to counter-propose the option of the blended for those activities. Otherwise, you take the risk that, if those activities are crucial and you don't have another way to demonstrate that you can really fund these other activities, the whole thing may fail to succeed in the evaluation process. I don't know, it's clearer or not, or the opposite.
It's clear, but we have more questions about that. I think the question is whether TRL is like a specific point in time, or is it considered a set of activities? For example, a lot of companies in software has to do a lot of marketing even before the product is finished. So in that case, they would do a lot of marketing activities before they reach TRL 8. So that's the question where, like, who makes the decision in the end whether it's going to be transferred to equity or not?
It's the jury.
It's the jury.
It's the jury, and can be refined by the due diligence in any case. But in principle, it's the jury, and the remote evaluation can do the same as well. But principally, this kind of issues could be studied by the jury. And I understand that if you have marketing activities and you are going for the blended finance, it's perfectly compatible that you have in parallel, because at the end is the capital of the company. And the important thing to me is that the project as a whole makes sense.
We have like one more.
One question is, if a project is in a stage that, you know, it's a transferring or transitioning between RTL 6 and higher levels of RTL, and the company has enough funds for the activities which are beyond RTL 6, can it apply for a grant for the certain, I would say, parts that it's between RTL 6 and 8 and prove that it can fund the more advanced stages?
Perfectly acceptable. It's an ideal situation. If the company really needs a grant for the technology development and doesn't need the money for the other final stages, that's perfect. The only thing, the only point is that you will see in the application forms, you will have to somehow justify that you really have those funds to cover the other stages. No?
Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
This is our last question.
Okay.
We also have to release.
Is the issue whether a company has raised money from VCs but still applied for a grant is determining will it receive the grant or not? I mean, the level of the money that the company already has, is this a factor in the decision of granting additional money or not?
Well, it's not the problem to have an investor on board, of course, but of course you need to demonstrate somehow that you really need the money. And so, well, I understand that if the company really has a lot of own resources to do something, it will be more complicated to really explain and justify why they need public money to do something that really can be covered. But in any case, well, we are talking about very risky projects, so we will have to really analyze if the project is so risky. Because if there are so many investors and they have all the money, and maybe the project is perfectly bankable and is perfectly fundable by others.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Luis, so much for taking all these questions. And so we're done. We are here still, the team of ISERD. If there are more questions, you can also find us on the website.
Oh, okay.